Just YouTube.
That way I don't have to split and try and figure out how I want to make chat look and all sorts of other stuff that is annoying.
So there should be another video about the Power Glove.
It's so bad.
No, I mean, I just added it in the chat.
Are you going to say that anytime someone mentions it?
It could.
What? It's so bad?
Well,
why not?
Oh,
I'm hearing myself. Oh, that's why.
Yeah, I'm hearing it through...
Because I had YouTube. I was here at YouTube.
Though that's the smallest amount of lag I've seen on YouTube. Holy cow.
Well, maybe they updated something.
Because, like, I'm hearing it before I even finish the word.
I'm not.
And yeah, not for me. I'm still getting lag.
Oh, wait, now there's lag. Okay, never mind.
Well, so much for improvements. Could all of you type something in YouTube chat just so I can just make sure everything's working?
Yeah, I have
Excellent.
chat disabled, so as long as someone's able to do it.
You know, if it makes you feel any better, breakfast, me too. I hate hearing myself. Why is this not working? There we go. For some reason, Brave's being a butthead about things. He's being a butthead about things. Okay, let's send out the alerts. Supernova, long time no see. How's it going? All right. So one thing I do want us to improve upon is we've been talking over each other a bit. And so if we could just try and let people say their piece. If you need a piece of paper because you're worried about you're going to forget something, just write it down, give yourself a note. Trust me, I am well aware of the glass house that this is. Although I think I've improved a lot.
You should just create a buzzer system. Mute everybody until they click a buzzer. And then you unmute them so they can talk.
No, we're mature adults.
I found that it worked great once I plugged in the microphone.
Ah, that's good. All right. Well, then I shall get us started. So if everyone could go dark, and we'll get going. So, when I was but a lad, I never thought there could ever be anything other than the default controller. The idea of something else just didn't even enter into my mind. We had the power pad and the zapper, but that came with the NES. The idea of something else just didn't exist until I saw this commercial on the television.
Power Glove for your Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you and the games are one. With Power Glove, everything else is child's play.
Lies.
Has anybody here used a Power Glove?
Lies.
I think I did once at a friend's house, but I don't really remember my experience with it.
I remember because
The Power Glove was an abomination.
the only reason I remember this is because that commercial looked so cool, and then my friend Kayvon had it at his birthday party, and I got to try it, and I realized, oh, this is terrible.
Well, I mean, yeah, especially the punch out at the end of that commercial.
Lies.
It's just
As if it
fantastic.
worked like that.
Oh yeah.
So what was it, like an early motion control? Like you move the hand and it sensed a button input?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually watched a more deep dive into the technology behind it, and it's amazing how similar it is to the Wiimote, actually.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Although there are some
It used ultrasonic sound instead of light, though.
there are some other differences though, because like I remember when I was playing and like for some reason my friend connected it to Super Mario 3. And I'm just sitting here like, what is the point of this? Because like if I twitched my finger, my index finger, Mario jumped. Because that's just intuitive gameplay right there.
You're saying that's not ideal?
It's very not ideal.
Okay, my question is, what did it retail at?
Mm,
Too much.
that is a good question. Let's
No
find that
idea.
out. Let's see. Okay, someone else will find that. Okay, so yeah, the way it worked is just similar to how the Wii needed the Wii sensor bar. This thing had a sensor bar that required two different sources, and it was supposed to go over the top of your television. But one, the cord was too small. Two, the two sensors were connected to one thing, and part of it's supposed to overhang. And if you didn't have the right size television, it would flop over. And three, the Power Glove itself had a freaking cord.
Okay, I found the retail price.
Okay. In
1989, and in 1989 dollars, $100, which is about $250 now.
I'm trying to think.
You could buy it for $75.
I'm trying
That's
to.
practically as much as it's half again the price of the NES.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a peripheral that I would spend that much money on.
VR? You
Yeah.
want to buy VR?
Yeah,
Maybe
that is the only thing I can think of.
maybe if you're into flight sims and you get like one of those full setups,
Like Gordon.
yeah.
Or that mech.
The Mech Warrior setup we were talking about earlier in the week.
We'll get to that.
I mean, that said, like nowadays, yeah, I mean, controllers are getting expensive anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
True.
a bad one is even worse.
It was a prestige controller.
Yeah. Well, speaking of prestige.
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
Kid looks like he's in a cult.
It's because he is in a cult. My favorite description of Lucas was from a Nostalgia Critic talking about he looks like one of the kids in the Crossfire commercial.
Oh yeah, totally.
I've actually thought that before.
It was just he said that and I'm like, he does look like one of the kids in the Crossfire commercial.
Thing is both that commercial and this movie.
And
tries
you
to-
mean this commercial?
Yes, this movie commercial. So the small commercial and then the big commercial both make the Power Glove look like something elite that only the best of the best use, and how it'll give you an edge, and oh my gosh.
I mean, it did take a special person to be able to get any use out of that.
That's true. If you were able to beat a game using it, you're one of those really skilled people that, use controllers, peripherals not meant to play anything but the game it was designed for, and try and play a game with it.
I am now looking up if someone has beaten Dark Souls with
Oh, gosh.
Glove.
Or
How would you even set that up?
Or like people that try and beat a game using a DDR pad.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly like that.
That's some people would probably... There are probably people who would spend that much money on like a super fancy DDR pad too.
I think I remember hearing someone beat a Zelda game using the Guitar Hero controller.
What were you saying, Lizzie?
Speaking of beating a game with the DDR pad, I remember my friends and I were playing Crash Team Racing with DDR pads, and we'd like sit in the middle and use one foot for the gas pedal and then smacking the arrows to either side of us for turning.
What in the world?
Now that sounds like a weekend.
It was ridiculous and so much fun.
Sounds like a workout.
Oh yeah, DDR by itself is a workout.
Yes.
All right, so I just want to talk about the original NES controller, because it's obviously it's the thing that most of us started on. Obviously, there was like the Atari joystick and the weird button.
Oh, the Atari joystick was iconic.
Yeah, but the original Nintendo controller, it's sort of what led everyone on the design of what gaming would be going forward.
Oh yeah, and I mean it was the genius design of Gunpei Yokoi too.
Gesundheit.
Yeah, Gunpei Yokoi. He was the Nintendo.
Was he like their he was their Q?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean before they started doing video games, he also designed a lot of their toys that they sold too.
Okay.
He was the one that patented the D-pad, and which is now the standard. But because he patented it, instead of having one solid piece that pivots in the middle, Sega had to make it two different pieces where it's where they cut the ball part out into its own piece that beveled up, that the D-pad sat on top of, so it wouldn't use Nintendo's patent.
Yeah, I remember that was kind of funky.
No, but
that's why the Genesis felt so much different.
Yeah, because they didn't want to use Nintendo's patent. But still, the D-pad, I think, is one of the greatest advancements in controller technology ever, and I still love it to this day.
Prior to that, it did not exist. The only thing we really had was the joystick.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because if you like, for certain games, like a lot of, it's very easy to look and think, the joystick, the analog joystick is just inherently superior. But there are certain games that just feel better with the D-pad.
Oh yeah, any 2D platformer.
Exactly.
When
I mean, 2D platformer or 2D overhead or.
Yeah, and like if I play a 2D platformer and it requires me to use the joypad because they map the D-pad to something else, it actually irritates me to no end.
Well, the same with JRPGs for me. Like the classic 2D JRPGs, turn-based stuff.
Oh yeah.
The D-pad is the only way I like playing those.
Oh yeah, I can't stand menuing with an analog stick either.
Exactly.
I like the D-pad.
Well, and I think the original NES controller, the A and B buttons were very good. The D-pad was good. Start and select, I felt, were a bit iffy.
Huh?
No, especially because I didn't like how to start a game you had to push start and select because they were still very arcadey thinking at the time. But I still liked start for pause.
Yeah, it was just because of the rubbery material of start and select, which is an interesting choice when you have the hard everything else. Why go with rubber for start and select?
I kind of like it.
But I don't know, it would get stuck underneath sometimes. And then
I never had that issue.
Never happened to me.
I don't know.
I never remember it getting stuck, but I do remember that the feedback on start and select wasn't always the greatest.
It could get like gummy underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have a snap to it. Yeah.
Which is why I prefer the hard look.
It's really interesting. Like, do any of y'all ever watch like tinkering or restoration videos on YouTube?
Oh yeah.
There's this one guy that I follow, and he's done several electronics, and it's always interesting when he does controllers because he goes in and he pulls apart, and you can see sort of the mechanic technical aspects of the controllers that he's playing with. Is just like, oh, that's why it responds that way.
Yeah, I learned a lot about that when our former roommate Josh was helping me fix my old GameCube controller. I'd never taken one apart.
And when he made his own abomination of a controller,
placing the C stick with another analog stick. What is that?
No, he had a GameCube controller and he replaced the joysticks on it with Wii Classic controller joysticks.
I named it Spite.
It was an abomination.
Speaking of an abomination, how about we take a look at the NES Max?
One Zulu Niner pre-flight check.
Roger, Tower.
Turbo A.
That's a go.
Turbo B.
Check.
Cycloid control.
A-OK.
Rapid fire.
All right, let's fire it up.
The NES Max, only from Nintendo.
Look at that thing.
The first iteration of a turbo controller. And everyone considered it cheating.
Yeah,
It is cheating.
And I do have one of those. I'm trying to think if I had it as a kid or if it's one that I picked up along.
I tried to play with that cycloid thing instead of the D-pad.
It is a weird D-pad, that's for sure.
You have no control over where you're going. That thing is slippier than an ice climber's level.
I see what you did there.
I don't think mine was that. I think I tried using it. I don't remember it being quite that bad. But
I just remember, like, if you moved
weird.
it all, like, you would shift, and it was just hard to do precise movements compared to the D-pad.
It had no dead zone. It was very imprecise.
Well, that and the problem is you had to slide it around as opposed to tilting it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only
it's like it wanted to be a bad mouse.
They kind of brought it back with the 3DS, but at least that one is so it can close properly for the
the 3DS. I remember that.
But even that,
I still
has
think one was better than that.
Well, it's because the 3DS had a springiness to it, so when you let go, it would go back to neutral. This thing had no like. Trying to not move with this thing was so hard. Now, I think in theory, the idea is you just, like, if you're going right, you just move it to the right and then you just leave it there because there's no springiness to it. And so your thumb is doing nothing.
The speedrunner's controller.
I kind of remember, though, that on mine you actually had to put pressure on it because I thought if you weren't putting pressure, it didn't matter where it was.
I don't know. Maybe my friend's was
maybe his was beat up and it was just always.
All I know, the other thing is the A and B button. The buttons are too big, like literally height wise.
Well, not only that, the turbo button is directly beneath your thumb, so it's very easy to accidentally hit it.
It was just one of these things where there were a lot of really weird NES controllers that were coming out. Now,
so let's talk about the turbo aspect, though, because basically all it did is just rapidly hit the button, correct?
Correct.
Did y'all ever see a controller like this that had a slow motion button?
No.
It just automatically pushed start over and over and over again.
Why?
It pause buffered for you.
It was pause buffering.
Call it the Mega Man 2 invincibility.
Oh, okay. I see.
That's not slow motion. That's just that's stop motion.
Well, on games like Super Mario Brothers, where pause just freezes everything. It worked okay, but on games like Mega Man, where the start button brings up a menu, it's just insanity.
Not only does it bring up a menu, it resets Mega Man's position. He warps back in. He teleports back in. So it halts all his aerial momentum. So if he's in midair, he warps back in, and then he lands on a surface before starting to fall again.
Yeah.
No, there was some weird stuff. But this is still, like, you can see what they're going for. The NES Advantage was another one you can see what they're going for, but this
Some
commercial's
guys
weird.
like to just play around. Other guys want to rock and roll. And the Nintendo Advantage controller is the perfect instrument for all you rockers. The choice is all yours. Get the Advantage only from...
I don't understand what's weird. I mean, that's how I play with an NES Advantage.
Oh
Dude,
yeah, full
I
on
totally-
shoes on the controller.
I totally had an NES Advantage, and yes, I totally danced around. No, of course not. But I did use this controller quite a bit. Now, granted, mine looked a little different, but it was basically the same thing. They made another edition that had like orange buttons, but it had the turbo, and you could set the... I mean, those knobs let you set the speed on how fast the turbo goes.
I mean, it basically turned your controller into an arcade controller.
Yeah. Though
But
the only...
And I think that was the real idea of this, is like there's a lot of arcade games that were coming to the NES that people were like, this doesn't quite feel right, but
The progenitor to the fight stick.
yeah, kind of, yeah.
It makes me think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game.
Which the NES version is a gross disappointment.
I loved it. I played the crap out of that game.
Well, I think that game's a big reason why Donatello's my favorite.
Oh, see, Donatello was my favorite largely because of the first NES game.
Well, Donatello was everyone's favorite in the first NES.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not get ahead of
I
ourselves.
mean, he does like double damage and it reaches longer. And
Yeah. Yeah,
You could
the
absolute
reach-
cheese certain
that was
boss
awesome.
fights.
Awesome.
you could destroy Bebop, or was it Rocksteady? It was
It
Rocksteady.
was Rocksteady.
Reach
Yeah.
is important.
Though the only game that I ever really remember using this Advantage controller on, it was mainly... There was very few games that the turbo really made a big difference. And I know Blaster Master, I would use it.
Oh, Blaster Master.
Because
Contra meant that
you
you
could
had...
hold down the grenade button when you were in the caves, and it would just spam the grenade like crazy and just made a wall of death in front of you, which was nice.
Of course, then there's the boss cheesing on some bosses with the grenades.
Oh yeah, do that too, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't have this one, but it was a famous one. Now,
I
Are you
wanted.
are you guys ready for the NES Advantage's cousin who is really into the 90s?
Oh boy.
Supersonic is the #1 bet. It's got no wires, it's a one to get. Arcade action is where you'll be. Supersonic will set you free.
It's
We're
where you
halfway
be.
we're halfway through this commercial. What what's everyone's thoughts so far?
Why is it a triangle?
Oh, you
It'll
noticed
mo-
that.
It unlocks the power of the pyramid. Oh no, sorry, that's The Office.
You know, I the fact though that they are making a big deal about wireless. There were no. I mean, this is the first Wavebird, right?
Kind of.
No, the first Wavebird, I remember there was a wireless controller on the Nintendo, and it used a laser. And so if there was anything that remotely blocked the between the controller and you didn't have it pointed in just the right direction, it did nothing for you.
Oof.
Yeah.
Nintendo, it will do.
Watch your
Games
score
for
go
players
up.
1 and 2. Higher scores is what you'll see. Supersonic will set you free. No wires.
Back when scores were a thing and people cared about them.
Supersonic.
Yeah,
Definitely did not have one of those.
Oh, you didn't?
that's
That
amazing.
That wasn't in every kid's
Did it just say batteries included?
yeah. But
That's
look-
the most amazing thing about this commercial, I think, that I've seen.
yeah.
It came with batteries.
Well, here's the other thing. It's designed for both left-handed and right-handed people.
Yes,
So the
yes, it
big
is.
buttons are just mirrors.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Also, just the irony of a Nintendo controller being called the Supersonic. That's kind of weird.
To be fair, it was before Supersonic.
That was
Indeed.
before the console wars started in earnest, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to go into the console wars, I think you need this.
You force. Only
I remember this. I forgot this existed.
I have no idea what this is.
Is this a theremin?
This is the
Yes.
Proto Connect.
This is the proto. So it used lasers the same way, except it would go by interrupting it. So the reason you unfold it is it had a laser grid essentially, and so where you moved your hand over, yes, it's a theremin.
Okay. No, I actually have seen there was a rhythm game arcade that did that where you interrupted a laser.
Yeah,
beam.
it was a DDR game, but not dancing. But this thing was, in theory, you would swipe. I can't remember how it worked, what you'd swipe through for A and B buttons, but a gaming historian has an entire video on the U-Force if you're interested.
I need to watch that.
I was such a what was the on Community, the guy who the dean, when he responded to advertisements, it's like a level 5.
You're level 7 susceptible.
Susceptible. That was me as a kid, because I thought this was the coolest thing too.
But you
Did
can
it
see
work?
The U-Force.
Oh no! Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked as intended, but as intended was absolutely horrible for trying to play video games.
Oh yeah. Oh, it'd be awful.
Yeah, it's
But
not
as
ideal.
a kid, we wouldn't have known that.
It's kind of weird to me how cyclical this all is, that these things all came out back in the NES era.
They were all ahead of their time.
And well, it wasn't just that, because in the mid 1990s, there was the initial VR hype.
The Virtual Boy remembers.
Well, the Virtual Boy wasn't the only thing, though. There were other VR headsets that existed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the only reason I even knew they existed, I'd never seen one myself. The only reason I even knew they existed was because some of the games that I had, because I was a PC player. I did not own any of these consoles. So my controller was keyboard, at least until the mid-90s, and then we finally got the mouse. But some of the games, like Descent, had VR modes that would be compatible with virtual reality headsets. And that's the only way I knew that they existed. I've seen some footage, but otherwise I've never seen a VR headset from that era. But it did come out, and then in the late 2000s, motion controls become a thing again, and then in the early 2010s, VR becomes a thing again.
You know, it does kind of show maybe there's less innovation than we think. You know, that all these things have been around. We just now have the computing power to actually make them decent now.
Well, it's not even just necessarily the computing power; it's the hardware design as well.
I think the bigger thing is actually the software design. The issue is they kept trying to do these with games that aren't designed for them, and they just didn't have, like, the Power Glove had 2 games, I can't remember what they were, that were designed for the Power Glove.
Well, one like Powerball?
The one was like Powerball. I can't remember the other. But it was
apparently that one actually worked really well.
It worked well, but it was just boring.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the Power Glove was the first Wii U?
Kind of. But that's the issue.
Games that were designed specifically for it, but beyond that, it just didn't work. I mean, yes, the Wii as well, but I'm thinking one of the reasons that the Wii U just didn't take off is because it was so weird compared to...
It's unintuitive compared to swinging a tennis racket.
But like when you're playing games, like for example, there were several games on Nintendo Land that were made specifically for it. It was great.
Yeah.
But to make a game for the Wii U, you had to exclusively design a game for the Wii U. It basically removed the potential of cross-platform.
That's very true.
And if you're a third-party developer who you need certain numbers of sales, what you gonna do? You're just not gonna publish on the Wii U.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's true, but there's also, some not truth to it, because a lot of times when games were cross-platform, all it was is in the other systems you had to press start to bring up the menu, whereas on the Wii U the menu was just always there on the tablet, and you had to put it on the TV.
That just meant that you could port a game to the Wii U. I'm talking about making a game that actually took full advantage of the Wii U.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Like, again, games like Nintendo Land, where one player has the controller and they're looking at the screen, or looking at the controller itself, and everyone else has regular controllers and are looking at the big TV.
Which, of course, my favorite implementation was Hyrule Warriors, where 2 players, you both had your own screen. It was amazing.
Yeah. Speaking of amazing, this is the last of the NES controllers I want to show commercials for. The Konami Laser Scope.
Imagine a time when you'll control your world with the sound of your voice.
TV.
All you do is say it.
Video game.
And it happens.
Laser Scope.
Introducing Laser Scope from Konami for NES Zapper games.
I remember this now.
Then give the command. With the power in your voice and a fire in your eye, you can live the future.
That kid's got some serious lash.
Start living it now with Laser Scope from Konami.
Because gamers don't yell at their games enough.
This led to a fun angry video game nerd where he realized it literally didn't matter what you said.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was just like pressing a button.
Well, there was no internet back then, so they couldn't exactly connect it to some server to translate what it was that you were talking.
Yeah. But it's just there was just this weird gold rush of weird, because there was also like the rock and roller chair. I'm trying to remember, there was a few of these things where it was like people were trying to come up with unique concepts to get you more into the game.
I wonder how much... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this was also around the advent of TV series like Star Trek The Next Generation, which brought in the holodeck. And so there's just this concept of, I want to be inside the game. And just like they wanted to experience the game as fully as possible. Like there was just this craze. I remember being like the prime, again, I was the prime recipient age for all this advertising. And I thought of it too. I mean, this is also around the time of Captain and the Game Master, where what's the fantasy? You are inside the video game.
Yeah, and there was just a lot of interesting stuff. So moving away from the NES, I want to talk about...
Well, just really quick, I want to say that this laser scope, that also came back in the form of the Kinect as well. The voice controlled and just, you moving your own body controls the game. So, I mean, it's crazy because we think of all like these, advanced things that we kind of got used to just in more recent years, but realized, there was even the laser scope back in the NES era.
Well, not just the Kinect. I mean, even like a lot of modern, like I think the PS4 or 5 has an internal microphone in the controller. The 3DS has a microphone, and there were some games that actually took advantage of it.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit before. The Genesis controller.
Too few buttons.
I remember the first time, because again, I was exposed to the Genesis before I knew the Super Nintendo was a thing, and I was just blown away. It's got 3 buttons? What is the third one even used for? What do you need besides jump and shoot?
See, and my exposure to the Genesis was after the SNES.
Yeah, well, so
and
the
so
biggest...
I was just like, it only has 3 buttons?
But it doesn't have a select button, though.
So the two biggest things for me with this controller, as far as, holy crap, we're moving into a completely different realm. One, it's not a box. So it was more comfortable to hold than an NES controller by definition.
But it was so chunky.
It was chunky. The other thing, the diagonal buttons was a big thing.
That did blow my mind.
Because you could actually move diagonally easily. And that was very big on the sports games. Because moving diagonally is really important if you're trying to avoid a tackler in Madden 96.
See, again, my exposure to this, though, was after the SNES. And so I remember going to this and trying to play Street Fighter on the Genesis, and I was just like, I'm missing 3 buttons.
How did they work around that?
You had to get the 6-button controller.
Let me pull which the 6-button controller was actually the one that I had on my Genesis. Yes, here it is.
I got one, but got very little use out of it just because when friends came over, most of the multiplayer stuff we were playing wasn't on the Genesis, it was on the SNES.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I did go straight to the Super Nintendo controller myself. Oh, yeah, look at that. Oh, they did XYZ. I'm not even sure I knew that.
Yeah, they did XYZ. The other thing, and this is something I only noticed now, notice the B button has a little notch.
Notch.
So that you can understand where your fingers are and not get lost.
The other thing is, if you can't see it in this picture, but in the top right, sort of where an R button would be, there was a little button, because I think there was some aspect that you could go in to program these buttons. But I didn't understand.
Not on any of the normal ones.
The one that I had, and it was this one. There was another button up where it wasn't like a regular button that you would push. It was more like a push this button to pull up the menu, or like hold this button down while pushing. And it wasn't intuitive to program, but I just remember that being there and being utterly baffled by it.
Yeah, but just the thing is, and the innovation of Sega, and this is where we start talking about how as these controllers get, further on, they start taking things that other ones did well and innovating on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with the Sega, we was like, okay, let's actually try and contour this a little bit so it's not just a box that cuts into you. And let's try and give some, a little more ease of, movement type of thing.
And reverse engineered the NES D-pad.
Yeah. Well, so then Nintendo comes out with the Super NES, which we now have 4 buttons, which
6.
Well,
don't forget LNR. Yeah.
No, but so we have 4 buttons, and then we have the first edition of the shoulder buttons, which this is the 4-button layout. You'll look at that 4-button layout. It's a little off center, but that 4-button layout is basically used by every other controller from here on out.
You're showing a third-party version, though.
Yeah, I just grabbed a random one on Amazon. Look.
I noticed that, too.
Don't focus on that.
But for
focusing.
This fine.
This was the controller that, blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the contours on the outside, it was, oh, man, such an improvement over the NES. The extra buttons, man, mind-blowing. Not just A and B, now an X and Y, and you can tell which one's which because one is concave and the other is convex.
Mm-hmm.
And then the addition of shoulder buttons, which RPGs, which was, the thing I love to do, they're like, hey, wait, we can use one of the shoulder buttons.
It's the original on the Famicom. Does that make you happy?
Yes. How about that?
Much better.
And with that, they even said, oh, well, you could even control the game with just your left hand because we'll be able to put the confirm button up there, and it's just wow, you can do that. That is.
I was about to ask you a question, Looney. Did you ever see the commercials for the one-handed controller? No. It was specifically for RPGs. Because it's something that you could play.
The commercial.
I don't remember if it was a commercial that I saw. I think it may have just been in a magazine or something.
Okay.
But it was let me see if I can find it. But it was designed so that you could be playing a game with one hand and then pull out a sandwich and eat while you're playing. And it was such an interesting concept to me.
Yeah, didn't really use it ever, but it still was kind of just a neat concept, though. especially for a game where you didn't need all the extra buttons. But on an action game where suddenly like, oh man, I don't have to like press select to change like which tool I'm using. They just map it to a different button. It's so cool. And then after using the Super Nintendo controller, that's when I first saw, went to someone else's house and played a Genesis controller, and I'm just like, 3 buttons, no shoulder buttons? Man, how do you guys play anything? Even though, it's like, I'd played NES games with even less buttons, so, but yeah.
No, are you guys ready for the logical extension of the Super Nintendo controller?
Of course.
Say hello to the Edge Super Gamepad.
I do remember seeing that, yes.
Those are turbo buttons for every single button.
There is no logic in this place.
I had a friend who they had this, and I had never seen a commercial for it, and I saw it, and I'm just like, what is this?
I had no idea that they made a Wii version, though. Goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Wii
what
version?
you pulled up. Well, yeah, that plug goes into a Wiimote.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah, this was because this was to replace your SNES Classic controller or whatever for playing WiiWare games.
See, okay, I have a confession to make.
Oh, I love this. Where are we going?
The first time I saw and used a Super Nintendo controller, I hated it.
What?
I absolutely
Blasphemy breakfast.
What were you coming from?
I looked at that thing. I mean, I had seen the Genesis, and I looked at it, and I thought, why is it so complicated? What game could possibly use so many buttons?
Friendship over. Friendship over.
You know what? Fine. I won't go out to your house then.
No, I'm just kidding.
I would be there now if it were
I was like the SNES fanboy. It's in my opinion, it is still the golden age of gaming.
And okay, now I don't disagree with you now. I'm just saying the first time I ran into it, I didn't know what to do with it. It was too complicated for me. I constantly forgot that the shoulder buttons even existed. And I almost never used them.
And for some reason with me, as soon as it was in my hand, it just fit so naturally.
Oh, yeah.
When I first played Street Fighter II, I mapped the heavy punch to X. No, I mapped the heavy punch to Y and the heavy kick to B, and those were the only 2 buttons I used. I didn't bother with any of the others.
Oh, that's funny. see, I remember after getting my Super Nintendo, I went back and I played on my NES, and it felt wrong.
Oh, well, when was the last time you used the NES controller? I tried to hold one after, becoming an adult. Like, this thing is tiny. My hands are cramping up just holding it.
Well, the thing that was weird is
your palm.
Well, and the thing that was weird is that I had gotten used to keeping my fingers on the shoulder buttons. And suddenly I had an NES controller that had those sharp corners and no shoulder buttons.
Yeah.
I have no shoulder buttons and I must scream.
Anyway, there's my confession. And when it took some time to get used to the SNES controller.
Lizzie,
not the ergonomics of it, but simply the fact that there were so many buttons. And even today, if a game is too complicated to where I have to think about what I'm doing next, I will get the controls mixed up and I will press the wrong button. I think that's probably why I stick with like platformers as my mainstay.
And Breakfast, I want to take a step back in this conversation. Well, I was going to say, I want to take a step back to earlier in this conversation when you said your first controller was a keyboard.
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
you like to play Mech Warrior as well, right?
Okay, Mech Warrior 2 came much later. That game was mid-90s. the first games I played on the computer was the first game I remember playing was Test Drive, the original Test Drive. And it used 6 buttons. You had the D-pad, up was accelerate, down was brake and decelerate, and you had left and right, or the arrow keys. It was the numpad at the time. The arrow keys didn't exist. And then you had A that was shift up and Z that was shift down. And most of the games were just that simple. Super Solvers, you had spacebar, and spacebar was jump, and I think control or maybe Z was shoot.
Jump. Up was jump.
Oh, that's right. Up was jump, and spacebar was shoot. So even then, most of the games used only the spacebar or maybe the spacebar and one other button. It wasn't until Doom where control became the default button for shooting.
Super Solvers takes me back.
And then Descent came in.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
But I find it amusing because that was the selling point of the NES over the, because keyboards had existed for a while.
Right.
And the NES consolidated into so few buttons. And then the SNES went up to more buttons, but it's still far less than the keyboard had previously had.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's still some keyboard, games that it's just super complicated that it takes like an hour to get used to the controls.
Okay, let me ask: did any of y'all ever play? I can't remember what the actual name or number or calls it, whatever of the system was, but it was by TI. It was Texas Instruments, and it was basically a keyboard that had a slot for cartridges. Do y'all remember this thing?
No.
Well, I saw it at a video game convention, and I tried to play a game on it, and I couldn't figure out how to because it had a whole keyboard. I had no idea what button would do anything, and I was lucky if I got the game to start, but then I couldn't get it to do anything. I'm just randomly hitting random buttons on the keyboard.
We had one of those when I was growing up. I think my older brother actually bought it before I was born, maybe even. Because he was 15 years older than me. But I remember growing up, that was my first game console. And I loved it. It was, let me put it this way. To save games on this, or to save any sort of information, you had to use a cassette tape.
Yeah.
So
That's insane.
it was old school.
Now, okay, I'm kind of familiar with your guys. Lizzie, what was the first console your family had?
I think it was the Sega. I don't remember when we got that, but I definitely remember when we got the N64, and that was pretty exciting.
Well, okay, I'm glad you say that because I have a very important question for you. Which color controller did you have on this sheet here? Because one of the big features of the N64 was everything was customizable.
They only had one of those that I remember, and it was bottom, middle, right.
Yeah, the gray. I remember having the gray. I think we had the dark blue, and then the top left, that see-through like teal.
Yes,
I remember having those.
All the see-through
right.
controllers. They loved those. So we had in my family, and I'm very interested because I feel the N64 first of all, the most bizarre looking controller from any of the mainline companies ever.
Oh yeah, the Trident controller.
Perfect if you're a Vortigaunt.
The D-pad was terrible.
Yes.
Yeah, the D-pad was...
The quality of the D-pad was absolutely atrocious, but it didn't matter because every game or every controller that Lizzie's family had met a cruel and unfortunate fate of Mario Party.
Oh yeah.
The only use of the D-pad on the N64 was taunting in Smash.
Pretty much. And even then, there was only one taunt back then. It didn't matter what direction you pushed.
Splice Mithril says that
I'm
we're
looking at
doubling. Okay.
Anyway.
But no, the N64 controller was... I remember when it first came out, and it was just... It took nobody just innately says, "Oh, I'm supposed to hold it in the middle."
No.
Yeah. So in my family, This is the original joystick drift, because this is the first controller that really needed a joystick. And the gray control, first of all the controllers we had to keep away because at this time we had my youngest brother who was a baby, and I don't know what it was about the cords of those N64 controllers, but he loved it. And he chewed the crap off of it.
And those cords were very thin too, and easy to break.
So we had that see-through purple one. We had a lighter version of that he had chewed clean through. Still worked, so we had to use it. But whenever it was me versus my sisters, I had to play with it because I was older and better at them, and so I had to have the one that sometimes had shorting out issues. The gray one had terrible, like the joystick, just the top rubber part had just completely rubbed off. And we had an orange one that was sort of the one we always wanted to use, and we had the hard green one as well. But that one was also, he had chewed through, but it didn't have shorting out issues.
Oh man.
The fun of having an infant around these things.
Yeah, my experience was so different because I was the youngest child by several years and was really the only one in the family who played. And I was actually particularly careful with my controller. So I still have some of my original controllers that are in great working condition.
I have a few of our N64 original controllers as well, but I have at least been able to buy some new ones.
Yeah, I just can't, like, you, Lunasar and Lizzie, you know this more than anyone. Children are the bane of controllers' existences.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
What have they destroyed so far?
Dude, like I said, Switch controller...
PlayStation
Nintendo
controllers
used to be so durable, but like the Switch, man, kids like they just look at a Switch controller and it just falls apart. Yeah.
But no, let's talk about, so just the N64. It's the first, it's designed for 3D games, and this is the first time someone has to really do that. And so you can see the leftover vestiges of the Super Nintendo, because you still have the shoulder buttons in basically the same spot. And you still have your 4 controllers, but that's now the C directional buttons, which most games weren't sure how to use those. And then there's the A and B. Okay. The joystick in the middle. All right. And then the D-pad way over there. And then the Z trigger button. The first time we got a trigger button.
Yeah. So it got rid of X and Y, but you still kind of had them with the C buttons.
The thing that's interesting about the Z trigger button, though, is functionally it's a shoulder button.
Yeah. Yep. It's absolutely a shoulder button. In fact, at one point, I'm like, well, how am I supposed to use the L button if I'm supposed to have my hand here? And I'm like, oh, they just put a second L button there. It's kind of the way I viewed it.
And in Smash Bros, your grab is L or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And so, though at the same time, I do kind of like how I feel like the way they designed this, they trained you how you're supposed to hold it by what was the pack-in title with the 64.
Yep.
Because you put in Mario 64, you pick up the controller, and you instinctively put your hand on the left D-pad, but Mario doesn't move. It does nothing. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? And then, like, you set the controller down, and you, like, move the joystick, and you're like, huh, that moves him, but I can't reach across. I physically cannot reach across, especially if you're a little kid like me. And for me, I didn't have a 64, so this was after someone got it. They invited me over for a sleepover, and we played Mario 64 all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And so okay, so this is what moves him, and I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to hold it there so I can actually use the joypad, and it kind of forced you to hold it that way to play the pack-in title that comes with the system, and kind of tells you, the games are designed for either the joystick or the D-pad, but not both.
There's one exception. So I didn't know this. This is a friend who told me this later on. GoldenEye, you could remap the controls. And so people who understood what was going on, they remap your movement to the D-pad. and then you remap your vertical aim with the joystick. And so you actually can, because if you're using the joystick, the default is to look up and down using the C buttons, which made it so difficult to aim up or down.
I thought you had to hit the R trigger to aim.
Yeah, the R trigger. And then
So
stand
you could
still.
remap the L, like you could remap things. Now the issue would then
But
be
you couldn't aim and move at the same time.
no, but you could but think about just how much easier it is to move up and down. And so he was talking about how he was smoking his friends because he had figured this trick out.
Well, and suddenly Odd Job is less powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away as a concept, as he sort of discovered, not quite, but almost the dual joystick FPS the way that we view it now.
Interesting.
Yeah, right? But it's the only instance I know of someone figuring out a way to use the D-pad and the joystick in the same way. But yeah, but it was at this time a new competitor on the block showed up.
Well, before we leave, I do want to talk about that analog stick because it had hard ridges to grip with your thumb. And you know, I mentioned playing Mario 64 at a sleepover, and I'm pretty sure when I woke up that next morning, I had a blister on my thumb because like just how hard those ridges are.
Forget blisters on your thumb. Mario Party.
Oh yeah, Mario
destroyed
Party
palms.
Destroyed palms. You get like practically not just a second degree blister.
I got a full blown blister. Like, and it was an instant one.
Because there were, several mini games where one player, at least, their job was to rotate that stick as fast as possible. And so the natural way to do that is you use your palm. Yeah. And as you do that, you are destroying your palm to the point where, like, I saw so many pictures of just destroyed hands.
Like, I mean, because those ridges were just solid, hard plastic. And now you're going to bring up the competitor, and they changed something that is made analog sticks so much better.
Well, at first they did not.
Well, first they didn't have an analog stick.
Well, yes, first they didn't at all.
Yeah, so first version of this is when PlayStation came to market, and this was their first version. And so it has the D-pad, but the D-pad essentially worked the same way as regular buttons.
So, yeah, they worked as regular buttons. It still did tilt like a D-pad, though.
Yeah.
But the big innovation of this controller, and I can't see it from this angle, is the fact that there's two L and R buttons.
Yep.
There's two L and R buttons. Well, and the other innovation, well, I guess technically the 64 had it too, but I feel like this one was much better, at least for my hands, having a grip for your pinky and ring finger to hold on to.
Yes, this is one of the first truly ergonomic controllers.
Like, I picked up this controller, and I'm holding it and I'm playing with it because the PS1 is what I got, and I remember thinking, this is the most comfortable controller I have ever held in my life. I love the PS1 controller. I love it to death. It was so comfortable. It was so intuitive. Everything just felt perfect and right in my hands. To this day, I love the PS1 controller and think it's the most ergonomic, even still. It doesn't have the analog sticks. That's the downside at this point.
The first one was to have the dual
by far.
The first one to have the two dual joysticks was the DualShock right here.
Right. Well, and this first PlayStation controller without the analog joysticks is why Final Fantasy VII controls just a little bit wonky.
Yeah.
Because you have a 3D environment, but you only had the D-pad to control with.
But it was awesome.
No, but
I got another hot take.
Okay, too many buttons.
The additional shoulder pads, I still wasn't used to the SNES shoulder pads. I still kept forgetting, and then they added two more, and I'm like, why?
Well, and I think, and we'll get to this later, but I think the big thing is those were just 2 shoulder buttons. I think what really started helping things feel different is when they started changing the second shoulder button to triggers instead.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that
yeah,
they have
it
completely
does
different
feel better.
feels. But
Though
this,
Yeah.
the downside
X-
of the trigger is the accidental hitting it when you're not trying to. But
yeah. But this is the, like, if you look at this, we're already sort of approaching what's going to become the modern game controller.
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, and at this point I'm like, oh, they added analog sticks. I'm like, when I held it, I'm like, well, it still feels the same, which is great. But when I put my thumb on the left joystick, like, it's not quite as ergonomic when I'm using the joystick as it is when I'm using the D-pad. But the added functionality was worth the trade-off.
That is the one downside for me of the modern PlayStation controller. The location of the joystick on the left-hand side cramps my thumb up because it's too low.
And
Yeah.
I understand that, and that's why I understand why, other systems have swapped the position of the D-pad and the joystick. But when I'm playing a 2D platformer, I'm very appreciative when the D-pad's where I want it to be. It's one of those things where I wish there was an easy way to just kind of swap those two on the fly. But I think there are controllers like that, but I think they're like over $100.
Yeah, but this is just one of those things that, have you ever heard of carcinization? How in nature everything slowly approaches looking like a crab. I feel like what we're viewing here is sort of the carcinization of video games controllers, where over time, as they each make little different changes, they start to choose things, and certain things people just figure out what works, and it kind of becomes weird to adjust around that. All right.
I love this controller though.
Yeah. This is one of the
it.
biggest jumps in controller quality.
Oh, and it was heads over heels better than the 64.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what were they doing?
And especially because they made when they added the analog sticks, they made it a softer rubber that was just so it still gripped, but it didn't dig into your skin and was so much more comfortable.
Well, there is one thing that's interesting. This is so the PlayStation comes out. What was Sega coming out with at this time?
Sega Saturn.
The Sega Saturn. Let's take a look at the Sega Saturn controller.
Yeah.
Cause oh wait, that's not the dang it. Where's the default one? I had that.
I remember it just being it just looked like the 6-button Sega Genesis controller.
Basically, it looked exactly the same. And then they got made fun of for it. Because it's like, okay, this is all you got for me. Sega was making some weird decisions because Sega would be ahead of the curve on technology and then be behind the curve in everything else. So I remember there was I couldn't find the actual ad, but it was for Knights came out. They're like, oh, no games like this, and you need a special controller for it. The Saturn 3D controller. And this is what they came up with. This is the most unintuitive, stupid controller.
Oh, wow. I have never seen that before.
Oh, you've never seen this, huh?
Yeah. It looks like an old Walkman. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it does look like a Discman. Oh my goodness.
I had one of those.
I wouldn't call that the most unintuitive controller I've seen.
Okay,
No,
I did see the Sphere. But okay, from a mainline company.
You should see the one that I just linked in the channel.
I'll go find that.
I also put
Because-
his one-handed SNES in the general chat, and that is weird. Baggins.
I remember now why I was so perturbed by the shoulder buttons of the SNES controller, because up to that point because I was on the PC, I had a Gravis gamepad. And the Gravis gamepad was essentially a Super Nintendo controller with no
So
shoulder buttons.
This is the one-handed controller you were talking about?
Yeah.
Made by ASCII? What?
Yeah, so that one was made so that you could play an RPG with a single hand and do other stuff with your other hand, like eat a sandwich or slap a sibling,
Yeah, I don't know what. Okay. But yeah, so that was the Saturn controller. Sega had a high point with the Genesis, but they made some confusing decisions after that. I'm going to skip.
Well,
What?
Around this time, though, was the one that I linked in the in the chat, which was the CDI.
Yeah, the CDI controller is
And there were a couple of different controllers, but the one I saw, this thing was like a remote control with an analog stick at the top, and then just a bunch of buttons that were oddly labeled. It's one of the most just
Oh yeah, I tried to play Hotel
unintuitive
Mario with it last year. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I was going through a bunch of different buttons. There we go.
No worries.
Yeah, well, it's because
I remember.
It's clear that they wanted this thing to be like, oh, it's a VCR video game system, which in some ways is kind of a little bit, interesting. Because, you had the PlayStation, which could play, I think it could only play CDs, right? Could it play DVDs
Yes,
yet?
it could only play CDs.
Oh, yeah, only
DVDs was the PS2.
That's right. That's what I'm thinking.
And that's actually the reason why they made the start button plus the play button. And
oh my goodness, I never made that connection.
Yeah, because it was the play button when you were in the CD mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the start button on the PlayStation looks the way it does.
What is this, breakfast? What have you brought to me?
Oh, are you talking about the rotationally symmetrical?
That is the
controller.
That's
I remember that thing. It's horrible.
Explain this. Explain this.
Because the PC only predominantly used the keyboard, there were peripherals that went through the.
It's not a USB port, but
not a USB port. No, it wasn't a mouse port. It was a game port. That's what they called it. They called it the game port. I think it was a serial port, but it just became known as the game port because all your game controllers plugged in.
Huh.
You had 2-button joysticks, you had 4-button joysticks, then they came out with joysticks with hats and triggers and all that jazz.
I do remember my dad had a joystick that he played Doom 2 on that it blew me away because it made an appearance in Star Trek Insurrection.
And this was the Gravis gamepad. It was the PC's version of a gamepad controller. The thing about the PC, though, is at the time, there were not a lot of platformers available for the game. There were some, but none that you really needed a controller for. But this one came bundled with Commander Keen 4, which was, bringing John Carmack into it. I don't know if he was directly involved, but it was an Apogee game, and ID Software was tangentially related to the development because they finally figured out a way to make a DOS game scroll properly so that it felt like a NES game, like a console game. Because prior to that point, all the platformers on the PC, like if you went back and played them, you have the Commander Keens 1 through 3, you have the old Duke Nukem games.
I had Mega Man 3
on the DOS. Oh,
yep.
Good grief! That game was terrible.
Ooh.
But you couldn't they felt different. They were stiff. They you almost had to go one screen at a time practically most of the time. And Commander Keen 4 changed it all. Things scrolled up, down, left, right naturally. And this game came bundled with this. It was a shareware version. It came bundled with this gamepad. And the thing that made this gamepad so different is that switch on the bottom. If you flip the switch, you could reverse the gamepad and use it left-handed.
So
what am I getting?
Here we go. This was the exact joystick we had, and me and my dad started laughing in the film. Manual steering column. And then this comes out, and this is the exact joystick that my dad had.
That is the Gravis Blackhawk. I had 2 of those.
Oh, man.
It pulled us right out of the film.
I'm just mad because that's not the Riker maneuver. The Riker maneuver is sitting down by swinging your leg over the back of the chair.
Correct.
And everyone knows it.
Well, you have to have a beard to do it, though.
Yeah, but he shaved in this film, and notice the film sucked. But this was
I'm linking a picture. There you go, Splice. The Gravis Blackhawk.
Where'd you link it? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Yep, that's the one.
Man,
that's
that looks,
the one.
That looks so much nicer than the stupid joystick I had on my old PC.
It was the first joystick I had that had a hat and a throttle. And it also had
the hat was a big deal.
It also had
awesome.
it also had yaw controls. You could twist the handle for yaw if you were playing a flight simulator.
I do remember that controller. I never had it.
Yeah,
and notice the plug, the serial port. If you could plug it in on one end, and it would have an additional serial port, so you could plug in an additional controller into that and have 2 controllers plugged into one computer.
Uh-huh.
Wow, fancy.
Yeah. No, I just remember because my dad because you could remap the controls, and so he remapped it so that he could cycle through his weapons with the hat. It was a big deal. He could strafe with the hat. That was such a big deal in Doom to be able to strafe.
The hat renovated Descent because you could set the strafe, because you had 4 directions to strafe. You had side to side and up and down, and you set those to the hat, and it would let you move in ways that you couldn't otherwise.
A literal game changer.
Quite. Although I used it predominantly to play Wing Commander when I could get it running.
But before they had the hat and the twist, I mean, joysticks were basically just the Atari joystick with the one button on the side and one button on top of the joystick, and that was it.
All right.
The one problem I had with this joystick is every time I pulled it out, I had to recalibrate it.
Well, we were talking about good controllers with this joystick. Let's talk about the behemoth. Let's talk about the original Xbox.
The chunky controller.
Huge.
The loaf of bread as we always called it.
The best for me is still Penny Arcade during this era had one of my favorite comics where the 2 of them are sitting on an Xbox, like it's the size of a couch, and they're playing with the controllers in their lap, like they're, husky
they're using
dogs.
it as fight sticks.
Yeah, but they're casually chatting, and it's just them chatting about some game casually, but the joke is just how big the Xbox controller was. I mean, look at this thing. First of all, look at how much space is taken up with their branding.
We need a banana for scale.
Well, okay, here I do have a question with that. Did the Xbox branding, was that a button? Did it do anything? No.
Nope, it was just a logo.
That was just a logo. Oh my gosh.
Let me see if I can find a picture of the original. Ah, here we go. Here we go. Let's see how far we've come.
I found that comic, by the way, but I'm not going to post it because there's...
It's Penny Arcade. There's language. Here's for comparison. The original Xbox with what would that be? Is that Xbox?
I think that's just a new Xbox.
That's 360.
That is a 360.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's once they hit 360, they've kind of stuck with it, which I'm glad because I think it's a really good design.
360 is my current PC controller of choice.
I am so glad that I never played on that loaf of bread controller, because like for me the PlayStation controller is the perfect size. I did have friends that had like enormous hands that loved the loaf of bread, but like, oh my goodness, I couldn't. I think I would like.
But look at that!
My fingers
It was
trying to
chunky.
play on
There's no doubt about that. That thing is huge.
Like, just look at that in comparison.
Well, and that's the thing. Even the new 360 controller still feels huge in my hands. I think that's kind of what Loonstar was saying.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, some people complain. I don't like how the PlayStation controllers are too small. I like the Xbox size more. Well, that just comes down to personal preference. I like the PlayStation size ones.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
for me, PS3 was kind of the ideal.
Oh yeah, I love the PS3 controller.
Well, but that's the thing is, all these things are going to be personal taste and the size of your hands and stuff like that.
So we still haven't gotten to my personal favorite controller.
What would that be?
I'm sure it's coming up next.
Well, man, there's suddenly a lot of pressure on me here.
Well, we're going through the generation.
Well, we are.
Is it one that you own?
Yes, I have several of them.
I have a feeling that there's a reason. The reason why it's your favorite may not be the controller itself, but the games you played on it.
Perhaps, but
why? Why is there not a good picture of this, of the original? Screw it. I'm just grabbing the Switch version. Because I'm just tired of this. All right. The GameCube. This thing is interesting. To me, it's still the most comfortable controller
as far as ergonomics go, the GameCube is my favorite controller. Just the way it sits in my hands is so comfortable.
Huh.
It's weird. Because, like, for example, I think this is the last of the truly unique controllers because of the carcinization of controllers, as we were talking about earlier. But there are certain games that just feel best with this layout.
One specifically.
Smash.
Yeah.
Smash in particular. But
well, especially with Smash, I kind of love the there's the weird layout of the A, B, Y, and X. And it's really strange because all the others, they have this, symmetrical square going on. Whereas this one, it's like the A button is huge, the B button is tiny, and then like the Y and X just kind of surround it.
Yeah.
But when you're playing Smash, it's great because it's like when you want to jump, you just find one of the weird shaped buttons and hit it, And it also forces you in Smash. You want to use A more than B, and it kind of trains you to use A more than B because the button's bigger.
Well, it's also asymmetrical because there's only one Z button.
Yeah, that too.
Which is it's only on one side, and it just it makes sense. You use it and move on with your day. But looking at it, it's just like, they went a different way.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that they talked about with this is they were experimenting with feedback they got on both the N64 and Super Nintendo controller, where people would get lost like with the feel of what button they were pressing. On the original Super Nintendo, we forgot to talk about it, but how like the X and Y, I think, were concave versus A and B, which were convex. And so
I did mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be with that, but people would still get lost sometimes. This was meant so that people could, just by feel, you would know which button you're pressing.
There was one instance in which I did not like the GameCube. And that was with the Mega Man Classic Anniversary Collection.
Tell me about it, man. Tell me about it.
Intuitively, the A and B on the NES controller were swapped orientation-wise, but they still mapped the jump and shoot buttons to those buttons respectively.
And you cannot unmap
and you
them.
cannot remap them. The other two versions of the Anniversary Collection for Xbox and PlayStation, you can remap the buttons, but not the one for the GameCube.
was just about to say, I'm like, dude, that's a great collection. What are you talking? Oh, right. I had it on PlayStation.
Yeah, and so I couldn't unmap that in my head. I just could not adapt. And so I played with my thumb sitting on the A button and my index finger overlapping it to hit the B button.
Well, speaking of
The
customization,
claw.
the claw method, right?
Yes.
I have beaten all of 8 of the Mega Man games on the GameCube in that, but it took some getting used to, let me tell you.
Well, the thing is, the other problem I'd see with playing Mega Man, a 2D, well, any 2D platformer, is once again, this, as much as I love the GameCube controller, the D-pad's terrible.
Yes.
Okay, yes,
And
but
it's in a
but
terrible spot, too.
Mithril points out in the
yeah,
chat,
Mithril, I want to bring that up, too. Absolutely.
the octagonal locking
Love it.
with that, because you could use the joypad on platformers because you could lock yourself into that position without worrying about drifting up or down.
So did the Anniversary Collection let you use the analog
Yes,
stick then?
the Anniversary
Okay.
Collection lets you
'Cause
use the
that would
analog
help.
stick.
But like the octagon's like the main reason why I want to play Smash on the GameCube controller and not others, because I really rely on clicking those corners. The octagon's awesome.
Have you ever seen the modified version that professional Melee players used? They literally
I've seen a couple of versions.
I've seen the one that's no analog stick.
They literally pull the controller apart and add additional notches into the octagonal pattern for specific movement.
Interesting.
Let me see if I can find a picture here.
I've seen this somewhere. No, that's not it. Looking.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they kind of did recess the D-pad into that well, and that just didn't feel good either. Yeah, I don't
Here
know.
it is.
But yeah, I just hate that GameCube D-pad, but I love everything else about the controller, even though it's so weird.
I linked a picture. You can see additional notches that they carve.
Yeah, let's see.
Ooh, that is interesting.
And it's specifically for like wave dashing and such.
Yeah.
You have to have the controller in a specific position, and so they notch it into those positions so they can find it more easily.
Wow.
Yeah, they're professional like controller people who what they do is stuff like this.
Well,
It's
like, I mean,
interesting.
speedrunners and pro gamers, they go through controllers so fast. So yeah, I'm not surprised they have their own market that's just custom controllers.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the GameCube, there was a big the GameCube had one big addition with the next version of it, which would be the Wavebird. I never saw these Wavebird commercials. They make me uncomfortable.
Oh, wow.
Oh gosh.
I disapprove.
Oh my gosh. Why? Why?
What about this?
Oh my gosh.
Imagine if they had marketed the Switch like this.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
That's the precursor to the modern smartphone.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that was interesting about the Wavebird, it actually had, for its time, pretty impressive range, and the form factor for it, for needing those batteries, actually isn't bad.
Yeah, just filled in empty space that wasn't in the way at all.
Yeah, but this is also the era, like this is the tail end of the play it loud generation, and so
Yeah,
these commercials are something else.
Yeah, you did sacrifice the shake, the vibrate
Yeah.
functionality.
Oh,
I
didn't
never
realize
cared for that anyway. If I had more options to turn off vibration, I would.
No, it was just very interesting that we got this. Now, I
we did
would
skip over that innovation entirely. The rumble.
Although,
Oh yeah, the Rumble Pack.
force feedback was something entirely different.
Or just-
than that.
Yeah. Not just the Rumble Pack though, but the ability to plug, auxiliaries into your controller.
Yeah, that was something the N64 definitely
Pioneered.
Yeah. The Xbox tried to pull into it for a little while as well.
Well, the one I remember really trying to lean into that, and I think sort of doing it at a weird time. I mean, look, it heralded the end of the company, but
Wait,
the Dreamcast.
You talking about force feedback or
No,
or
the
plugging
ability.
into
The ability to plug stuff in.
Oh yeah, where the Dreamcast had basically a Tamagotchi for the controller. Yeah.
Had that hole. Which is weird. This is another weird control. Sega,
and it was
got
very
weird.
prominent on the front.
Yeah.
It was weird. It was like a PS1 system was the controller for the Dreamcast.
The other thing, the big flaw of this controller is its wire.
Well, yes, that too.
Plugging into the bottom.
Yeah.
I swear, like I've never heard anyone say this, but I've always felt like they were trying to make it look like a spaceship taking off, and the wire was the smoke.
I can see that. I can see
exhaust
that.
trail.
But like I said, when I first look at it, it looks like a PS1 system. Like the circle should open up and you put a disc in it.
Look, there's a reason Sega went out of business, kids, and it's unfortunate, but they made like a solid 8 years of bad business decisions.
Now, people I know that had the Dreamcast loved the thing to death, though.
It's the software. The software is what makes them love it to death. I'm shocked that we
the
haven't
Dreamcast
gotten
had
another
good
Power
software. The Saturn did not have that great of software.
Well, there's a reason they abandoned the Saturn.
Saturn still has a Mega Man game that I have never played, though, and I think I brought that up in a previous.
Had some of the best hardware, but it was overpriced and no software really used it that well.
What was the price of it?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember that famous 1997 E3 moment, because I want to say that Sega announced they had this huge long half-hour presentation of the Saturn, and I think they were saying it was going to be $500 or $600, and then Sony gets up and just says PlayStation $399 and sits down.
Well, according to this, it says the Dreamcast launch for $199.
Well, the Dreamcast, but the
sorry, you went back to the Saturn. Yeah.
Yeah, the Saturn was grossly overpriced.
Well, but that's the thing that's so weird, and we didn't talk about the PlayStation 2 controller because it's just the DualShock 1.
Okay, also the PS1 wasn't $399. I got that number way wrong.
Yeah, but but the point is they then went to the weirdness of the PlayStation 2 dominated because of how cheap it was, which is sort of the same reason the Game Boy dominated. It was just cheaper and didn't sacrifice too much on game quality, because those are the two things that matter the most: price point and good games, right? And then PlayStation 3 comes around, and given how many PS2s they had sold, you can be forgiven for thinking that you could charge your next system for whatever you want, but $599 just stands out as a permanent meme. That's just even more hilarious if you know how they broke Sega's back.
Yeah, exactly.
The Saturn was more expensive than the PlayStation 1 as well.
Yeah.
Well, that was what that E3 97 moment was, is they had this huge presentation about the Saturn, and they mentioned its price, and then Sony just got up and just basically said that their launch price was half of theirs and sat back down. They didn't give a speech, but everyone cheered just at the price point. And that's how the PS1 completely knocked the Saturn out.
Yeah. The one thing I will say for this controller in particular, because I got to play it one time. I had one friend who I wasn't the best friends with, but I went over to his house one time. We played Power Stone, and I'm still shocked that we've never gotten a Power Stone re-release, just because that game was a ton of fun. But the joystick felt really good. It didn't have ridges. It not like the top of it, but like just the movement on it. I just remember thinking this feels good. So whatever was going on internally, I liked, but it didn't have any ridges or anything to keep you on it. So there's that downside. I don't know. This is just, Sega, go home. You're drunk. All right. So PlayStation 2 were basically the same.
Well, there was a pretty big difference with the PlayStation 2. All the buttons were pressure sensitive.
Yes, that is true. They look the same.
I mean, they look exactly the same, but they're pressure sensitive, so it could tell whether you were softly pressing or hard pressing, and so it could actually, one button could do multiple things. Though I think the only thing it was used for was Gran Turismo, let you push the pedal harder, and that was about it. Very few games used it, but it was kind of an interesting concept that I thought was super cool at the time, but at the end of the day, button as a simple on-off switch with a very tactile feel of when it's on and when it's off is really all that matters.
The first game that used those kinds of buttons that were pressure sensitive was the original Street Fighter.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
well, the arcade, yeah.
Yes, the arcade. Well, the original Street Fighter, as far as I'm aware, has never been ported to anything else.
Oh, no. It's also terrible.
Yes, it's also very terrible. But it only had 2 buttons. But it still had 6 attacks. You had your light, medium, and heavy punch, and your light, medium, and heavy kick. But the buttons were just punch and kick, and it was entirely how hard you hit the button that determined which attack came out.
Which is interesting.
It seems kind of like it was adapted to a degree in Smash Brothers.
A little bit, yeah, because you have your tilt attacks versus your strong attacks.
Your jabs, your tilts, and your smash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, so the PlayStation 3 controller was also basically the same as the PlayStation 1. And basically, they stuck on the DualShock for a while. And it wasn't until the PlayStation 4 that they changed things up, where they gave us this weird pad in the middle.
The trackpad.
Yeah.
Discuss.
There was the first game I played that had a use for it was I had Infamous. No, not Infamous. Well, actually, Infamous has a very interesting use of this controller, but it was Injustice: Gods Among Us, the DC comic fighter, is in between the matches in the story mode. There was a place where you had to be as Batman throwing batarangs, and on the PS4 version, which I was able to, it lets you put in the PS3 disc and play the PS4 version on it, and you'd swipe up on the trackpad to have Batman throw the batarangs, which was kind of neat.
Similar to, I think it's in Nintendo Land, there's a ninja game where you're throwing shurikens.
Yes.
And you take the Wii U and rotate it 90 degrees, and then you swipe your hand across it to throw.
Yeah, so that was kind of a gimmicky, interesting thing. The only real, clever use I saw of it is you'd bring up, the map, and it lets you kind of scroll the map a bit or, zoom in and out of the map by using it, which, it's kind of nice, but I didn't use it a whole lot. Though, you can see up there's that blue light, though.
Mm-hmm.
And, and there's this giant glowing section in the front, which I know why they put it in. They put that in for the PlayStation Move functionality, because it looked for a giant light. But that is one thing that really bugged me about the PS4 controller is, hey, you know what I think you need? I think you need a shorter battery life. So I'm gonna have this giant bright light that drains your battery.
You know the other thing that did.
If you're playing in the dark, you have this glow in the house.
That light could change colors, and so when you had a second controller activated, it'd be a different color for the P2 controller. The white blue was P1, but then it was like an orangish color for P2 or red.
Yeah,
definitely worth it for 4-hour battery life.
Yeah, well, I think there were some games that actually did make some clever use of the light though, where if you were like at full health, it'd be green, and as your health got lower, it would turn red. That was kind of neat, but also like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, so
the real question is who's paying that much attention to it? Yeah. No one's looking down at their controller.
Yeah.
I will say I do love how the triggers feel on this controller.
Yes.
Yeah, the triggers do feel really nice.
This was, I think, the first one that had there was something special about it. Is this the first one that had feedback, or is that was that not until 5?
I think that was not until 5.
The haptic feedback. Okay.
Yeah, the haptic feedback's 5. Though the triggers on this one, Infamous, I mentioned Infamous earlier. Infamous Second Son has probably the most interesting use of the PS4 controller. I know Lizzie wanted to make sure it was talked about. Do you wanna say it or do you
sure. Yeah, so I wasn't the one playing. Loonstar was the one playing, but after seeing him use the controller in this way, I made him let me try at least once. But what it is there's sections in Infamous where you're like spray paint the Second Son, okay, where you're spray painting the wall, you're putting up some murals and graffiti, whatever. But you hold the controller sideways and you can shake it, and you hear like the spray can shaking sound coming from the controller.
Okay.
And then using your index finger, you push the trigger to spray the spray can.
Huh.
And so it used the motion control of you shaking, because you had to shake it first. And it also used the motion control of where the spray can was pointing at the screen, because it could, it could feel what tilt and relative position of the controller was. So it required you to actually kind of aim holding the controller sideways vertically. I mean, so like your hand, so it's just one hand gripping it to where your hand's kind of in between the two grips, and your index finger's on the trigger, and you shake it, and you spray painted it, and that's how you did the spray paint minigame in Infamous Second Son, which was like the most unique usage of a controller I'd ever seen. And like I said, I'm like, this is really cool, and she saw me doing it, and she's like, that's amazing. Well, I want to try.
It was just a nice touch.
Yeah. Speaking of gimmicks.
Well, let's not move on yet, because the other thing that was interesting about this one and the previous one that I don't think we talked about is pressure sensitivity was also implemented.
Well, yeah, and it was
so like depending on how hard you pulled that trigger and even how hard you pushed those buttons, it would actually affect the response in the game.
Well, PS2 had that as well with all the analog.
PS2 didn't have pressure sensitivity, I don't think.
No, it did on the buttons, like the X, circle, triangle, and square. PS2 had pressure sensitivity. Just
I don't recall that.
Used that.
But with the shoulder buttons at least as well. Like you could pull it, halfway for something to happen, and all the way for.
Yeah, this the PS3 was the first one that actually had the whole tilting trigger, so you could push it just part way in on the trigger, and this one, the trigger felt much better on the 4.
But yeah, that's what I was going to mention. Isn't this the first that had like the curved trigger, so your finger didn't like slide off?
Yeah, because in the 3 it slid off pretty easy. And of course, the other innovation in this thing that was brought up with the shaking it is it has a speaker in the controller.
Yeah. Now the Wii did that one first, though.
Speaking of the Wii, this is the biggest mistake in gaming history. Nintendo single-handedly derailed the entire industry with this controller.
Yes, they did.
Seemed to work out okay for them, though.
Oh, it worked out amazing for them. Let's be real. They this thing, it got your grandma to play a game.
It got my dad to play a game, and that's even more impressive to me.
But let's talk about this, because this controller is incredibly interesting as a controller.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I mean, it was revolutionary.
Yeah, don't bring that up. Don't bring that up. Okay. First of all, the thing that is so interesting is they understood clearly from the beginning that they were going to be going big on WiiWare and people buying old titles, because this thing, the first time I saw someone turn it on its side to turn it into an NES controller, my mind was blown.
Mm.
It also made this controller way better, because like the first time we saw the remote, we're like, a remote control? No.
But then they added the nunchuck.
Yeah, well, but even without the nunchuck, just having the Z button so that you could hold it in one hand and use it sort of like a gun, actually.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I mean, one of the launch titles for it was, what was it? Red
Steel?
Red Steel.
Yeah.
And they even had a peripheral thing that, like, attachment that you could stick the remote in and literally turn it into a gun.
Yeah, the Link's crossbow, and then the third-party one that looks like a gun, which was much better than the crossbow, frankly.
So, in my opinion, one of the most interesting uses of this controller, it didn't go over well, but I remember when I first heard about it, it kind of blew my mind, was in Red Steel, which, again, was not a great game. But there was a concept that was put in that I thought was brilliant. And that was in the multiplayer version or mode in Red Steel. They had an assassin mode where each person was assigned a different target. And so basically, like, I might be trying to kill Looney, and Looney's trying to kill Breakfast, and Breakfast is trying to kill Splice, and Splice is trying to kill me. And the way you knew who your target was you held it up to your ear like a phone, and it spoke the character's name.
Oh.
And I was just like, okay, that's actually very interesting, because it's like, again, you hold it up like a phone, and it's like you're getting your assignment, your target assignment from from headquarters. And it's just like, okay, that's a very, very cool concept. Now, the implementation was awful, but I loved that idea.
That's interesting.
The issue with this controller is that it's entirely a gimmick, but when the gimmick executes well, it felt great. I'll never forget playing Metroid Prime 3 with the stupid nunchuck. They would, or in the Wiimote, they'd have you just to open doors. You would click A, pull out, twist, push back in, and I never got tired of how cool that felt.
No. I got so tired of that.
I did not.
I got sick of it after the first time I did it.
I never got tired of it. I loved it.
So because not only that, well, I marathoned that game, but after about an hour or so, my wrist would get tired and strained because I had to keep the Wiimote pointed at the sensor the entire time.
Yes.
And I just wanted to relax. No, I hated playing Metroid Prime 3.
I didn't marathon games in that era. So
I mean, that's the interesting thing. Some people prefer Metroid Prime on the GameCube controller. Some people prefer it on this. I don't know where I fall, other than the fact that I haven't beaten Metroid Prime 3 yet, but I have beaten the other two.
The thing that was, I feel like, the biggest misstep with this controller is the selling point was, you're playing games, but you're being active at the same time. Wii Sports is our demonstration. Look, you're playing sports inside on your video game console. When it came to video games, though, if I'm playing a video game, I don't want to be active. I want to sit on my couch and turn into a potato. Yeah, and with a lot of the Wii games that came out, this was not an option.
No.
Although I will say, Wii boxing got much simpler when I realized you didn't have to go through the full motions.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
You could just flick the controller in certain directions to get the desired result.
Well, like I mean, and yeah, and Mithril's bringing up Skyward Sword. I mean, as much as I love that game, it was so hard because you had to, especially when you had to like stab forward, and it would register a vertical slash instead, and like.
Well, heck, it was so bad that it was botched at E3.
I mean, it's the imprecision of motion controls just made me realize how important and special buttons were. The Wii made me appreciate buttons in a way I never had before. Because when I press a button, I know what it's going to do, when it's going to do it, how it's going to do it. But when it's required to make sure that the potentiometers and maybe not potentiometers, I forget what they're called. In that thing, register motion in a very specific way. Oh,
the gyroscopes.
See,
it wasn't
and
gyroscopes; it was different.
I'm a bit on the opposite side. Playing Twilight Princess on the Wii, I loved being able to just swing my arm like crazy to attack the monsters that popped out of nowhere and not have to think about what button do I push. I just started flailing.
Yeah, I think
I'm
in the same boat with Lizzie.
Button mashing.
But the thing is, with Skyward Sword, the direction you swung matters. You have to swing up and down on certain enemies, left and right, or stab.
Or diagonal.
That one needed like the Wii Motion Plus, though, didn't it?
It did.
Yes, it did. Now, the thing that was interesting is when Skyward Sword HD came out on the Switch, they actually implemented controls into the game where you could just use the right joystick to do the directional attacks.
Because they had to, because they had also come out with the Switch Lite. And so you can't detach the controllers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it had been done before, like Metal Gear Solid 2, when you had a sword, it was your right joystick is how you slashed in a direction. So it's like it had already been done before, so they knew how to do it. But
I don't remember that from Metal Gear Solid 2.
Right at the very end, when Raiden has the sword.
Oh, right.
And but yeah, in Twilight Princess, it didn't matter what direction you swung. It was just, moving the Joy-Con
was a button.
Was a normal slash, the A button, whereas the swinging the the nunchuck was the spin attack, which Link would always have a spin attack charged up and didn't slow down, didn't have to stop and crawl to have a spin attack. It was just always there, which made the Wii version so much easier.
I hate the implementation of the stamina bar in Zelda.
But at the same time, well, I guess I say doing a spin attack was easier. I don't know if the game actually is easier because the GameCube version, there was so much more technique you could do. With like the shield and the sword and the
because of the hero shade.
Yeah, because of the hero shade, that like combat got so fun, and I don't think it would have worked at all on the Wii version to do all that fun shield bashing stuff. So I think combat was probably more fun, but like Lizzie liked being able to just Astalos just jumps at her and she just freaks out and swings her arms, and then Link attacks. So
yeah, I was even in Skyward Sword. I'm definitely the person who was the sucker for the motion controls because I did like it in these games. But Breakfast was talking about it earlier, and he's 100% correct. It's not something you can just sit there forever and do. It's draining. And so Nintendo learned this, and so especially with all because we discussed the fact that they were making really good sales on the Virtual Console, and so they finally came out with what is the actual worst controller they've ever made, in my opinion, the Wii Classic controller. I hate this thing.
Just
the
fact
wire on the bottom was awful.
The wire on the bottom, the lightweight, cheap construction.
Yes, and that's the biggest thing. Everything felt just wrong and cheap.
I actually really like this controller, other than the wire coming out of the bottom. I hate the wire out of the bottom.
Did we learn nothing from the Dreamcast?
But there was a pro version that had grippies for your, ring and pinky finger.
It had wings.
It had wings, and the wire came out of the top, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
It was also made with less cheap stuff.
And I love that one. I mean, I still like to use both of them, but yes, the pro version is so. I actually like this controller, but the pro version improved everywhere this one went wrong and made it 1,000 times better.
I wanted to like this one, but oh gosh, it was painful.
I love this, and I would use it as much as possible, because frankly, I didn't like using the nunchuck and Wiimote that much. If I could plug in this thing to my Wiimote, I would every time, and that's how I played Xenoblade Chronicles, for example, was on this controller, because I wasn't going to play it otherwise. Though the big downside I saw to using this controller was you left the Wiimote unattended, and then your 1-year-old toddler could crawl up, grab the Wiimote, and hit the home button on you. And then you hit the home button on that to go back, and he keeps hitting it again, and then he starts hitting other buttons, and yeah. That was its big weakness. Is it left...
Children are the big weakness.
Yes, children are the big weakness, because you leave stuff unguarded, because you don't have a third hand.
said earlier, difficulty children.
Yep.
Yes, difficulty level children.
Well, so the one thing that I never thought was possible, and I just wonder if you and Breakfast and Lizzie remember this, I think Baggins had bowed out of the Smash League at this point, was Radman was one of the best players, and he would play on the frickin' Wiimote and Nunchuck.
He was the only one on those controllers. Everyone wanted the Pro controllers or GameCube. I don't know how he did it.
Well, he was so impressive.
Pretty well too.
Wasn't there?
I still think he preferred a GameCube, but he could still do it just fine on the Wiimote, which was.
I feel like there was somebody who played just on the Wiimote itself.
Yeah, I remember.
That would be Uncle Lothar.
Okay.
Oh, is that who it was?
Yeah,
okay.
And they were teammates, and I still to this
they
point...
were brothers.
They were brothers.
I do not understand how they achieved this. I'm still convinced sorcery was involved.
Because I'd rather go to this than use the Wiimote.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather use the GameCube controller. Beyond that.
Yeah. All right. So
hold on. Before we move on from Wii, I want to share one little story.
Okay.
That's working back at GameStop. I remember there was someone came in once, and he was an amputee, so he only had one hand, and he was looking into what console he should get, and Wii was honestly the best choice at the time, because I'm like, there's so many games you just play with one Wiimote in your hand. You only need one hand for it. So for that, I give it a positive.
You should. It's like that is, and we will actually get to accessibility in a bit. One last
thing I would like to say about the Wiimote, about the difference with Twilight Princess, is it's cooler but also creepier when Midna's sounds comes out of the Wiimote instead of the TV.
Yeah. Those creepy giggles.
It freaked me out when Lizzie was playing on the Wii, and I'm like, wow, okay. That did not come from where I expected it.
GameCube version is still the best version.
Oh, without question. Without question.
Well, so we discussed about how the Wii led to horrible trends that the other companies were chasing because the Wii sold, if I remember correctly, just sold under the PlayStation 2, if I remember correctly. Or just over. I can't remember. It sold a lot, was the point. And suddenly, Sony and Microsoft were like, oh my goodness, we got to get that casual market. And thus entered the Kinect. The controller that isn't. This thing did not work. Oh, there's so many great videos of people like just trying to do stuff on the Kinect, and it just it just doesn't work. It's bad.
And it's not even the first of its type either, because back on the PlayStation 2, we had the PlayStation Eye, which is basically an earlier version of the Kinect.
But the Eye wasn't as ambitious of what it was trying to do, though.
No, it wasn't. But I remember we had like a hoverboard game or something, and watching my parents try to play that was hilarious.
Yeah. What was it the PlayStation 4's motion controls were called?
It was the Move.
That's
the
right.
PlayStation Move.
And what it does is it basically expanded the iToy where they wanted the... well, it started on the PS3, but they basically had a Wiimote with a ball of light at the end that the camera's watching. And the idea was, because it's tracking this ball of light, that it'd have much better one-to-one motion than the Wii or the Kinect would have, which I believe is true. But it also... And that's why the PS4 controllers have that giant thing of light at the end, is because they figured, if people still have the PlayStation iToy, then we can still do motion control just with the controller, tracking that light. But the thing is just no one cared anymore at that point, so there's not really any games that really took good advantage of it.
And on top of it, it looked...
It does look silly.
Yeah, silly. We'll go with that.
But, I mean, the silliness is what made the tracking better, because the computer could better see exactly what's going on, what distance, because it could, measure the size of the ball, so it could know exactly the distance and know exactly the positioning. It gave it better information than the other options.
Yeah, but that's solutionism at its worst, where you design the technology to solve your problems rather than the consumer's problems.
Yes. Well, I mean, part of the consumer's problems was that both the Wiimote and the Move sucked, and the Kinect sucked. So
the Kinect was easily the worst of the three, though.
Yeah, but at the same time, yeah, that thing looks ridiculous, and there was hardly any games for it, so it was kind of a waste to buy it anyway.
But this is the issue when these companies start chasing trends. And it's the one thing is with all my frustrations with Nintendo, and boy, do I have a lot of them. Nintendo doesn't tend to feel like they're chasing a trend. They just seem to be in their own little world sometimes. You don't get something like the Wii without being in your own little world. Because
I just looked up the Wii. The Wii was 7th, right below PlayStation 1 in sales.
Gotcha. Well, Really? Below PlayStation 1? Because I remember it was competing for quite a while.
Yeah, the Wii sold 101 million units, and the PS1 sold 102, and the PS2 sold 158, which is still king.
Do they break out the different versions of things?
So like the light, you mean, or?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. 'Cause some lists break them apart, some don't.
No, it's grouping like all the PS2s together.
Yeah, for some reason. Then again, this one was, I think, all front loaded as well with the Wii. Like, it exploded.
Yeah.
Because it like, there were shortages, and I just remember it was destroying it. But like I said, you don't get these types of things without being in your own little world. And being in your own little world is also what leads to inventing one of the worst things ever, the Wii U.
I liked the Wii. Again, I'm going to diverge from probably the popular opinion. I feel like they did not use the tablet enough. When I played Wind Waker HD on the Wii U, the way they integrated the tablet into that game felt so intuitive. I had never had an easier time switching and swapping between items to where I could utilize Link's moveset in ways I was never able to do in past games.
You're not incorrect. Now,
and you're not the only one.
But
in fact, my oldest was just getting on my case yesterday. You're making me play Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the GameCube because you took back the Wii U. I want the Wii U back, Dad.
But the question is it worth this horrible controller? Because let's be real, this is a bad iPad. It's not a good controller, and it's way too expensive for what it can really accomplish unless you're really going to commit to the bit. And its battery life was bad.
You just leave it plugged in. That solved that problem.
Well, except you can't.
The battery would die.
Yeah.
I mean, like, literally, on my desk, I have a swollen Wii U tablet battery right here, in fact.
Well, we can't see it.
Well, yeah. If I applied heat, it would explode.
The problem is the kids left it charging. They'd pull it off for like 5 seconds. Oh, it needs to charge, and they'd dock it, and they killed 2 batteries for the Wii U tablet.
Yeah, the extended battery, I didn't even get to... Like, I bought Nintendo's extended battery for it when the first one died, and I was excited to use it, because I'm like, oh, I'm trying to play a game, but it would just die so fast, and the game required it, but the kids use it... I don't know. The thing is, people talk about the Wii U as a bad system. To this day, if I let my kids have access to the Wii U, they will play it more than the Switch. And that's even though we've bought a lot of the games on the Switch, so they'll quit asking for the Wii U to play it. They love the Wii U more than the Switch. They demand it. And it drives me nuts.
But the other problem, and this is where we get into, because we were discussing about how it's not just the games or the controller, it's the implementation thereof. Like we were talking about the trackpad or whatever it was called on the PlayStation 4. And how there's some innovative things you can do with it. The Wii U was designed horribly, where you have to boot up using the gamepad, even if you're not going to use the gamepad. And then you have to go into that weird Wii U plaza, and then you have to go into the game. And then you know, it's like, okay, which are you using? And it didn't work very well. I just remember always being annoyed by it.
You didn't have to use the gamepad to start a game.
I remember you did, because I always had to do that with Amiibo stuff.
I thought you could do it through the
you could do it through just
controller.
the TV and the gamepad, because you'd hit X and it'd switch which screen was on which device.
I thought it was hitting minus, but yeah, there was just a button you clicked to say TV only.
Minus was the general one to play the game.
I just remember there was something I always had to do with the gamepad. It annoyed me.
I think we're discovering why Splice didn't like the Wii U. He didn't use it.
Because there was times where when I was the one playing the Wii U and the tablet died, I just left it dead for days before I charged it, because I'm like, I'm not going to be using the tablet for this game.
That being said, I thought some of the ways in which, especially with that early Wii, what was the
Nintendo Land?
Yeah, and especially with the way they utilized some of the mini games with Nintendo Land and how they utilized the Wii controller. I think more games should have done that.
I said when Nintendo fully used it to its capability, asymmetric gameplay is one of the least utilized parts of gaming. Mm-hmm. And it allowed for that. And one of the most fun I've ever had. Now, I don't know if I'll ever have as much fun as us playing Sweet Day on Nintendo Land and playing Cops and Robbers with that thing.
So much fun.
And for me and Lizzie, it was playing 2-player Hyrule Warriors, where she had the tablet and I had the TV, and we didn't have to split any screen. It was amazing.
It didn't, and you didn't get frame drops when you use certain moves because it was actually more powerful than the Switch.
Yeah. Well, in the Switch version, you have to split the screen, and they split it in the dumbest way possible for the
or vertically, don't they?
They split it horizontally.
Oh.
Which
on a widescreen TV?
Yeah, exactly, on a widescreen TV in a game where you care more about what's in front of you than to the side of you. They split it horizontally instead of vertically. I cannot comprehend what they were thinking with that decision. So you can see what's to your side, but that doesn't matter. But playing the original on the Wii U, where you both had a dedicated screen, Oh my gosh, the asymmetric play possibilities. I love it. So, I mean, yes, if I could use the Wii Pro controller, the Wii U Pro controller, I absolutely would. And, you know, games that required the gamepad, like Xenoblade Chronicles X, where it had the map on the gamepad, and I'm playing with that, so it's like I did have the tablet just sitting next to me, and then I'd, you know, use it when I wanted to fast travel on the map, but I'm still playing on the Pro controller.
But
I still love the thing, but I would use the Pro controller whenever possible.
Yeah, but I'll just go back to, because we were talking about Nintendo Land. There were so many brilliant uses of it. Secret information is one of the most underutilized aspects of the Wii U controller. I mean, because again, you had the
you can't screen watch, yeah.
Right, no, but like you had that sweet the Animal Crossing game where you're
Sweet day.
You're eating candy, and the cops trying to chase them and catch them. But then you also had the
Luigi's Mansion game,
the Mario game where you're running away and all the toads are trying to hide and seek. Where, and it's just like, again, one person has information that no one else has. The Luigi's Mansion game where they're sneaking through. There were so many interesting ways to utilize giving information to one person that no one else has.
Yep.
And the reactions that we had when we were playing with certain friends, like with the Luigi's Mansion game, the ghost could hide behind a wall, and the other players, their controllers are vibrating, so they know someone's close by, but they don't know where they are. It just and the ghost meanwhile knows exactly what's going on. They're hiding over in the corner and just giggling to themselves. It's such a cool use of that technology.
Yeah, and the two biggest issues with this, because I love it, is one, this only works when everyone's in the same room, and unfortunately, gaming is moving further and further away from this, and so you can still do asymmetric gameplay now. Look at Among Us; it's a perfect example.
Dead by Daylight.
Yeah,
a lot of horror games use asymmetric gameplay now.
And so, but you can use these things, but it's just everyone's on a different screen already, and so you don't need some gimmicky thing. The Wii U is unfortunately a product that just came out. It came out at the wrong time, for one, because in-person gameplay is further and further down the priority list.
Well, I also want to say, as far as like remote playability, where someone wants to play something else on the TV, but someone wants to play on the Wii U. So, like, say I wanted to play something on the PlayStation, and Lizzie
I was
wanted to play on
playing
the Wii U.
Pikmin 3 on
so
tablet only most of the time.
So there were times where she was playing Pikmin 3 on the tablet, and I was playing something else on the PlayStation. And for remote play of a console, it still has by far the best like implementation of that. Because like PlayStation did it, but it lags.
Yeah. Now,
Steam Link, it also lags.
I remember the range being an issue.
The range is a little bit of an issue, but it was pretty good.
I don't know. I
remember being able to play on the tablet in my room while the Wii was located in the main room at
I thought the range
place.
was decent and it was lagless. Okay. It was great.
I had issues. Like, I'd walk out with it. I couldn't go back to my room with it, for example.
Well, your room was further away.
Because me trying to remote play using like the PlayStation's PSP or PS Vita, it worked. It was so laggy and terrible, whereas the Wii U tablet was perfect and crisp and sharp, and it was just. I'm like, I'm still impressed at how well its remote play works. So,
the other
I don't know.
Now I'll disagree with you on the Steam Link with lag, because I still use my Steam Link very regularly, and it's great.
I think for me, it's the Steam Link issues I run into is I have to jump through hoops every time for it to not go to an external server, and I don't know why.
Huh. I have zero issues with it.
I don't think I've ever tried the Steam Link.
Yeah. The other thing with the Wii U, though, and this is just talking about the controller itself that drives me nuts. the glossy finish to this thing makes it look like that thing is a child of Nurgle and is always diseased. Just it picks up finger oils like nothing else I've ever seen on a controller.
Yeah, and we had children playing with ours. It needed wipe downs regularly.
Well,
I don't have children.
Why we have a
needed
rule
wipe downs.
to wash your hands before picking up a controller.
Even with that, the Wii, I don't know what it was about the gamepad specifically. It just picked it up like nothing else, and I don't know. It just always bugged me looking at it. Like, you look unclean. Looks like you have a pox of some kind.
So, I don't know. I know a lot of people bag on the Wii U, but in our household, we really loved it. And like I said, to this day, the kids would play it more than the Switch.
What do they play on the Wii U?
There's, well, I mean, a lot of the games we had to get on the Switch. But
well, one of them they've really been wanting is the Kirby Rainbow Curse, I think, where you have to draw on the gamepad to move Kirby around.
Oh, I thought that was a DS game for some reason.
Well,
I think there is a DS version.
Yeah, there was a DS. I mean, there was the DS game, and then its direct sequel, which used the same mechanic, was on the Wii U. Because there was, I think one was Rainbow Curse, and the other was.
I think the DS is Canvas Curse.
Oh, Canvas Curse was the DS one. Yeah.
Well, moving back to Xbox, because we already looked at the 360, which sort of codified what we sort of view as the modern controller. Here's the Xbox One controller. Now, I think this controller feels really good, except for the material it's made out of. I don't know. I just can never get quite a good grip on it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know if anyone's played with an Xbox One here.
I have never played with an Xbox Series or Xbox One.
Only at a display, like at a store, and it felt all right, but that's not really a good.
Yeah,
I
love its joysticks in particular.
If I'm honest, I've always hated Xbox controllers.
No,
with a passion.
These joysticks feel great.
But the main reason why I hate Xbox controllers is because they chose A, B, X, and Y, and put them in different spaces than Nintendo does.
Yeah,
so
I agree. That bothers me.
Ever hit the right button?
For
Guaranteed,
me,
I will hit the wrong one.
I have ever since the SNES always hit the wrong button, because they do it the Japanese way, right to left, whereas my brain says left to right, and. So for me, this has always made so much more sense. It's an underappreciated genius of the PlayStation controller to just avoid the issue altogether by not doing something in order.
It's not unappreciated. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm like, I love that they chose symbols. Otherwise, I'd get so confused.
Now, I don't ever remember where those symbols are because I don't play with PlayStation controllers that much. But it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, you've avoided the East versus West problem.
I just think it's funny that Xbox, Nintendo, and PlayStation all use X, and they're all in different places.
Well, technically, the PlayStation's is a cross, not the letter.
It's an X.
It's an X.
Everyone says X.
There is a meme of the press X, and the gamer's like, "Oh no, what do I do?" Because they're using some controller that doesn't have the buttons labeled.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing, this D-pad, it feels weird, but because it's not like you're typically playing platformers on an Xbox One, so it doesn't tend to run. It just feels weird with its shape. I don't know. Because I haven't done it enough, I don't know if it's bad. It just feels weird. I'm not used to it, and so I'm like, I don't know about this. It's just bizarre with that weird concave shape. But yeah. I think that means what should we do next?
How many more do we have to go? Because
we basically have two more, I think.
We've been at this for a little while now.
Oh man.
Do we really need to review controllers that are currently in use?
Yeah. I want people's opinions on the PlayStation 5 in particular.
Well, it's like we haven't done we've talked about some joysticks, but we haven't done HOTAS controllers, and we haven't
I
done
mentioned force
peripherals.
feedback, but I didn't have time to really talk about that.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the Steam controller.
That thing was definitely unique. The Steam controller for the
Oh
Steam
my
Link.
goodness, I forgot about this thing.
I almost.
I had a feeling it was forgotten, so I had a picture pulled up.
It's the only thing I have that has the Xbox button layout. Yeah, this is an interesting guy. They actually added haptic feedback, so you kind of have a better feel of what you're doing with the trackpads.
The thing that's interesting about this, in my opinion, is that they actually have taken some learnings from this and implemented it into the Steam Deck.
What do you mean?
I hope the Steam Deck's D-pad's better than that.
Well, if you look at this
trackpad D-pad,
right? So
awful.
this has the trackpad D-pad. The Steam Deck has a D-pad, and it also has a trackpad.
Oh, thank goodness!
On either side, so it has both, and the trackpads do have haptic feedback.
The haptic feedback on the trackpad actually feels really good.
It feels really cool on the I splurged this year and got myself the latest, nicest Steam Deck just because it's something I've been wanting for years. And
welcome to Linux.
And it's just been very, very interesting. But it actually did take some learnings from this. It's like basically the Steam Deck is like this controller and the Switch had a baby.
I believe it. Yeah.
But we've learned that children are the bane of controllers. So what does that mean?
Our kids actually haven't had problems with this controller. I personally think it's too big in my hands, but they seem to enjoy it and use it enough. But they still, I think, prefer when we connect PlayStation controllers to the Steam Link.
Well, yeah, and I thought I'd use it for my 2D platformers on PC, but no, I definitely use my PS4 controllers on my PC.
So I use my 360 controller for PC stuff.
I pretty much. I mean, when I'm still not using, because again, I gonna confess, I didn't have a console until I bought a GameCube in 2006. So the only way I could play early console games is via emulation. And while I did have the Gravis gamepad, most of the time I was using a keyboard. I still play platformers on my desktop with my keyboard.
That's right. You use a keyboard because there's too many buttons on a controller. Wait.
I have my system. I have mapped it out, and my hands are comfortable with it. And I find that I play fighting games with my keyboard. Because I find that the keys are so much more precise than a joypad.
Well, I want to talk about the PlayStation 5. In particular, I want to talk about the haptic feedback triggers.
Now, I love these.
Okay,
dude, I oh my goodness, I played the demo of the FF7 Remake Part 2, and the haptic feedback, honestly, I wasn't expecting it when it happened. I'm like, whoa, that's weird.
So explain it, because I haven't touched a PlayStation 5.
So
there's one right outside your room.
Yeah, I just haven't there hasn't been a game I've wanted to play on it.
I have one in my room and I haven't played on it.
There's variable resistance on the triggers. And so depending on what you're doing, so I was I was climbing over an object and it decided to push my finger back out against my will, and it was really weird, but it was, I don't know, it's kind of cool. But they increased the rumble features on there, so it's not just the other ones, there's just a light rumble and the heavy rumble, where it's just got two weights that are on a motor. This one, it's tried to be a lot more precise in how it creates feedback and rumble. And so someone was telling me that there's a game where it's raining and it feels like raindrops are falling on your hand because of the way the controller is responding to
it's fascinating. No, one of the first games that I got with my PS5 was a Ratchet and Clank game, And I remember, they had a lot of games now have this where you hold the left trigger to go into aim mode, and then you pull the right trigger to fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one, I pushed the left trigger to go into aim mode, and suddenly it felt like the right trigger locked, and I have to pull back harder. Like it's actually on a trigger that has that kind of resistance, and then you get past a certain point, and it clicks like you've let the hammer go, and it's just this really interesting feeling. It's amazing when it's implemented well. It's almost mind-blowing just the way that this haptic feedback just on those triggers can be. I'll have to show you sometimes, Blaze.
Yeah, but now what is the price point on a PlayStation 5 controller?
It's like $70.
It's like 70 or 80 bucks.
I was just curious how much more they had to do for that. But no, like I've seen, like when they first announced haptic feedback triggers, they didn't really explain it very well, I felt, in their commercial. But it was like, it was one of those things I'm just like, that could be interesting, but you haven't told me enough for me to decide if that's true or not.
Well, like
it makes it feel like you're pulling an actual trigger, yeah.
Well, the other thing is that it's not just, it goes beyond triggers. For example, there was, I can't remember which game it was I was playing, but you would use the triggers as sort of your interaction button, or as like as a push the door open type thing.
Okay.
And so if there's a door that you're pushing, you have to pull harder to push faster on the door, and it's like the pressure sensitivity, but it's also giving something back, so you feel that resistance.
That is interesting.
It's really interesting the way they've implemented it.
Basically, today's been a long con for me to get feedback on this.
So, I don't know. I haven't actually played that many of my PS5 games that really utilize it a whole lot. So
there are some though, and it feels very cool when they do.
Is it a thing sort of like we were discussing with the Wii U, where only a few people are taking advantage of it?
Well, the difference is, I don't know that it's entirely necessary.
Yeah.
So like in other words, you can port the game, and you'll just be missing out on some, special little bonus features, but you don't have to remake the game.
Well, I think the big issue is that the majority of the PS5 library is still being released on the PS4. And so they're still primarily programming for the PS4 just because it has such a large install base that it's worth it for companies to do that. And so I kind of feel like they're not fully using all the features of the PS5 for that reason still to this day.
I've seen it in a few things.
Well,
the other thing is, again, it's sort of like with Nintendo first-party games, but of course, Sony has a sort of suite of internal development wings.
Yeah.
Like they've got the Naughty Dogs and the just other companies that work exclusively with Sony.
Yeah, because I will admit, for me, the biggest draw for me to get a PS5 was so I wouldn't have to fight with my kids for the PS4 anymore.
That is an issue that you have that I don't. I want to talk about one more controller before we finish today. I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro controller.
I love this one.
Yeah.
I love and hate this controller.
I just love it. It just feels comfortable.
I just wish it wasn't made of breadcrumbs that fall apart.
I've never had problems with
I've never had any sort of... Mine feels like a tank.
Resistors on those joysticks go out so many times. At least I could buy... Like, I literally buy packs of replacement analog sticks, pull these suckers apart, desolder the analog sticks, and solder new ones in so I don't have to buy.
You're the only person I've heard have this issue.
You may need to sit down and have a chat with your kids, because I've never had any
not
issues.
just on my kids. On
it was
mine,
his special Xenoblade one.
Huh.
Even on my personal ones.
Is it only?
I am just so
disappointed
only ones
that
at
you
Nintendo's
touch?
Quality control on these things.
You may need to sit down.
I
They
think
chose,
the-
and it's
it might
not
be-
just me. It's not just me.
Really? Because I haven't
I
heard
go
this
online.
before.
Well, there's a reason why you can buy packs of just analog controllers, where it's like $250. Like you get a pack of multiple analog sticks, where it's $250 a stick, and I mean they're just super cheap analog sticks.
I
They're
have
just
never
little
had an issue.
slim pieces of metal that just easily bend out of shape. The analog sticks, they just went cheap on those analog sticks, and I'm very disappointed in Nintendo for doing so.
Man, I have not had like
They're
the analog
crap
sticks-
analog sticks.
Man,
They're crap.
I like the feel of these things.
Yeah,
I
have
like
never had
actually
an
holding
issue.
the controller and using it. I'm just sick of how often those stupid analog sticks go out.
Man, I have
I've
not
had-
run into
They're
this at all.
crappy.
I have had the same Switch controller for basically since I bought my Switch, and I've never had an issue with it.
Like my Switch Pro can I have one that I've replaced it. I've replaced it once, and it still doesn't really want to work on the left control stick. My special Xenoblade Chronicles 2 controller, that's when it went out, I was, like, oh great, I can't replace that, but I was able to desolder, solder on a new analog stick, and it works fine now. But man, I've just been so disappointed, and it's like I have some that I need to take apart and fix. And the thing I find really annoying is the fact that these things are $70 as well, or 60 or $70, and yet the third-party cheap $30 Hori controllers are better designed and built than this thing.
You know what's causing the controller to be the same price as the PlayStation, don't you?
Quite possibly.
It's
But the thing is, they added the
NFC.
NFC.
Yeah, that's
It's
what
NFC
it is.
They added.
As soon as you remove that, you have a lot of room. And for me, this is terrifying because it's a good reason to get rid of stuff like Amiibo. And I'm like, well, but I like Amiibo.
So yeah, the NFC I think is what really jacks the price up on this thing.
It is because if you literally go to third party, like none of them have the NFC stuff, and it keeps the price.
And so
way
I'm
down.
disappointed the Power A controllers, they're not that great, and they're the ones that actually have the Nintendo seal of quality on it. And then like the cheapest ones that are Hori, HORI, they're actually the best. They're the best ones. They have the highest quality joystick. They have the highest quality buttons. They're the ones that have been holding up to the kids' punishment without taking, they can handle it. They've been fine. The ones that have lasted the longest for me are without question the cheap Hori brand, the third-party brand, which just boggles my mind. I don't know why Nintendo screwed up the quality on these controllers so bad.
Man,
and the Joy-Cons are even worse.
The Joy-Cons are awful. There's a reason we didn't even bother bringing them up. Those things are terrible. I haven't had any issues with the.
So I love when it works. I love when it works, but the quality I'm deeply disappointed in.
Man, this is enlightening for me from your perspective, because I have not. This is nowhere close to my experience at all.
And like I said, I can't blame the children, because one of the ones I had to fix, kids were not allowed to touch ever.
Maybe.
I didn't touch it either.
So I think the problem here is Lunisar beats the crap out of controllers.
Dude, what are you talking about? I have NES controllers that still work perfectly.
Well, look, let's be that era.
This is my one of my newer consoles.
Yeah, no, but
and it's the one that has controllers going out. I have PS2 controllers that are fine.
The NES era of Nintendo. I mean, there's the famous Game Boy that survived the war in Iraq.
Okay, I will admit I've had PS3 controllers go out that I have thrown away, which I now regret because I now realize it's just a piece of foam that just got too soft, and you just got to thicken it up with tape. Yeah, there's a cable that the way they hold it in place is it's literally a piece of foam that just creates pressure to push it against the pad, and it goes out. And all you gotta do is thicken the piece of foam that holds the wire in place.
Really?
The connector.
What?
I wish I had known that before I threw any away of the PS3 controllers, but because when that starts going out, it starts disconnecting and reconnecting and giving ghost inputs. But I didn't know that when I threw away some PS3 controllers. But yeah, That's the only other type of controller I've had go out, and it was not the analog stick.
No, for me,
And that was children.
Yeah, the thing that's gone out the most are GameCube controllers, but that's just due to
I've never had a GameCube controller die on me.
Not die. It's
or its analog stick go bad.
Yeah. Oh, the analog stick for me, but that's just because I smash so much. And
I don't understand y'all.
The rubber is what is the problem.
But yeah, it's for the Switch. It's the actual little piece of metal that is what the resistance across the metal that creates the voltage level, depending on how much you've moved it, that it detects where it is. That's what goes bad on these things, and it's a really flimsy, like super thin, like I don't know. It's just super cheaply made.
Now the best controller I have is I got a Gully Kit Pro controller. Friend of the show Ammonite got me onto it, and it's never going to have issues with the joysticks because it uses the Hall effect. And so it feels so smooth, but it was expensive. Look into it if you want a high quality controller. I love Gully Kit.
Gully Kit
or Gilly Kit. Gully Kit.
Do they have a Switch Pro controller?
Yes, it's what I mostly use. It actually had a version with NFC capability, which is what I got. But it uses Hall effect sensors, which, if I remember correctly, that might be what was on the Dreamcast. I can't remember, but basically, there's no moving parts that like touch. And so what happens is it senses the magnetic field around a sensor and how much it weakens. And so instead of having a contact point that can wear down, it's just an electronic system.
That's nice, because this one, it's a contact point that just gets bent out of shape because it's super flimsy.
Well, and the thing is, you look at most controllers, that is the problem, is the contact points, because something's wearing down. And so this can't have that. I really like this. And the material it's made out of, it has a slight, not ridge, but like it's not perforated. What's it, where it's rough. And so it sits really well in the hand and doesn't move around. I really like it. Anyway. All right. So one last question before we get heading out. Favorite controller? Everyone on the panel. I just said mine. This Gully Kit's my favorite.
Well, that does sound nice. Though I will have to say PS1/PS2/PS3, but I don't know. I have a special place in my heart for the PS1 before it had analog sticks. Love that controller.
Interesting. Breakfast.
I have to go with mouse and keyboard.
Boo, go with controllers.
Are they not controllers?
No, they're mouse and keyboard that we have jerry-rigged into being something else. We're talking controllers.
Ultimately, I have to go with the GameCube. I still think it's the most comfortable controller that has ever sat in my...
The weird thing for me in the GameCube is the most comfortable GameCube controller I've ever had is a Mad Catz controller we had that I don't know what it was. This one specific model of Mad Catz fit perfectly in my hand, and I somehow lost it, and I'll never get it back, and I can't find what it is, because as if anyone cares about Mad Catz controllers. All right, Baggins.
Power pad.
Oh.
No. No, probably
bold choice.
I'd probably go with PS4. Or actually, I will even go directly against Looney on this. I love my Switch Pro controller. I don't understand where you're coming from, because my opinion differs so greatly on that.
Well, like I said, for me, I love actually using it. It's just the fact that they break is what irks me to no end.
Again, knock wood, but mine is in fine condition.
I didn't hear any knocked wood, man.
I did.
Okay, just saying.
I'm looking up this Gilly Kit, and I'm seeing some that are only like $10 more than Nintendo's, which, I mean...
Check to see if it has the NFC capability or not. I can't remember the price I bought it at.
But I'm impressed if for an extra $10 to not ever have to worry about those stupid joysticks.
But no, my personal favorite is probably somewhere between the PS4 and the current Switch Pro.
Okay, and then Lizzie, you get the final word.
Mine might seem a little weird, but I think just for nostalgia and uniqueness, I'm gonna go with the N64.
Love it.
I loved the fact that they had all those fun, clear, very 90s controllers, you know. That's nostalgia.
The clear is awesome. That is one thing I do like about the Switch Pro controller is the fact that it is clear.
You can see slightly into the wiring.
And I have a clear PS4 controller as well that I like.
There is something about seeing the circuit board stuff that's really neat.
See, that's never appealed to me.
Yeah, I don't really care for it. It's like, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but a lot of several Mega Man armors from Mega Man X series has components where they're transparent and you can see the inner working inside them, and I've never liked those as a design aesthetic.
Oh,
and I think it's the same for these kinds of things with controllers and such.
I think
I love it.
I think the reason I like it is it feels almost like forbidden in some way, like you're not supposed to be able to see it.
See, I have a window on my PC, but all of the components in the PC, I ordered it custom. They are all aesthetically arranged, so I like that. With these sorts of controllers, you look inside and it's a mess. It's just like it's actually kind of boring to me. I like the mystery. I like the aesthetic design of a controller itself.
See, and like I said, I just like it, nostalgia reasons, to the point that when I finally found some new N64 controllers, since our old ones are dead from Mario Party, I made sure to get some that had that clear casing, because that's just important to me, I guess.
I like it too.
And I don't fault anybody for liking it. It's just not my favorite.
Yeah. No, look, there's no accounting for taste. Well, we covered a lot.
We did.
Well, Breakfast, do you have anything to promote?
Not tonight.
All right, perfect. Lunasar.
I feel like I should promote some sort of controller. How about DDR pads? Yeah, they're awesome.
There's another rabbit hole.
Not the Power Glove?
We didn't even get to DDR pads or
we didn't talk about the trackpad
Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really talk about any auxiliaries other than the Power Glove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll promote DDR pads. And there's a whole slew of DDR pads, so I'll promote them.
All right. Baggins.
I'll do the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies this time. If you like Brandon Sanderson, if you like his novels, if you're not afraid of spoilers, meaning you've either read them all or you were like Breakfast here and just dive right into them anyway.
I thought you said it, I thought you were just going to say or breakfast as like the second category.
But
I wear it as a badge of honor.
Yes, you do. But you should definitely check out our podcast. It's me and Splice and our friend Amy. We talk about Brandon Sanderson books and the Cosmere and dive in, and we've had some really interesting episodes. A couple episodes ago, we actually had a medical doctor who's a friend of the podcast come on, and he talked about medicine and how it's depicted in the series. So it's really cool. So definitely go check that out.
All right. Lizzie, are you still catching Padoves?
No, I am taking a break from Perdove until there's some new way to hunt it, because I went way over. But
what was the final number? I'm trying to get.
But she got one. She got one.
2,620 encounters. So like more than double over odds. It was not fun, but it's done.
I bet
as of yesterday.
I bet you've played entire games shorter than trying to get that shiny Pidove.
Probably. I had worked on that since December, so yeah, it's been a while. But I will promote my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Lizzie Petrichor. I do Pokemon shiny hunting and sometimes a little bit of Pokemon playthrough. I did back in February a little bit of Mario for 4 and Feb, but mostly Pokemon shiny hunting.
All right. And then for me, you can find me on Twitch and Kick under the name Splice Stream. Don't know what we're doing tomorrow. I'll figure it out later. All right. Oh, fun episode.
Oh, guys.